Do you recognize this sound? It's come in many forms over the years.
Too easy! That was incredible!
Sometimes it's incredibly mean. But no matter which incarnation, this sound is bound to send a shiver down the average Sonic fan's spine. Because you can say whatever you want about these games in your angry YouTube reviews, but this right here, this is when the game gets to review you.
Insulting. Your training has been a waste of time.
This is where the ranking system comes into play, which we first saw introduced all the way back in Sonic Adventure, where you were given a grade between C and A depending on the difficulty of your mission. This system was then further refined in its sequel, Sonic Adventure 2, where instead of the rank signifying which objective you completed on that playthrough, it instead was a result of how well you played in any given stage. Usually this ranges from an E to an A, but eventually the series would introduce the elusive S rank, which became a mainstay to this day. As a kid, these stressed the hell out of me. The knowledge that I was constantly being monitored by the game and that any wrong move could be the difference between Sonic being happy at the end of the level or expressing his deep-seated disappointment in me. My first mainline Sonic game was Heroes, and I would play that thing all the goddamn time. But I wasn't good at it. It's not the best game to give a 5-year-old, let's put it that way. Especially one like me who had an aversion to reading. I was also pretty stupid and didn't realize I should be listening to what the characters are saying and associating that with whatever is happening on screen. Point is, I was bad at it.
What's wrong with me?
Whether it be switching to the right character on the fly, understanding the level up system, or even just starting with Team Rose instead of jumping right into Shadow's story because he looked cooler. It took me years until I could finally beat one of the stories in this game. And because of that, there was nothing more heartbreaking than finally getting to the end of that really hard stage I had spent weeks replaying over and over, falling down the bottomless pits time and time again, only to hear this.
We can do better.
I can't, Teals, don't you get it? To make it even worse, I had no idea what the hell a memory card was. Sometimes, I would just take that thing out of the console and put it somewhere not realizing it did anything. So occasionally I'd just turn on one of my games, see that I had to start from the beginning and go, oh, weird. Well, guess I'll start over. With Sonic Heroes, though, it was made even more horrifying, as the character who says the victory line is typically the one who had the highest score by the end. And with the power type arguably being the best to control in this game for not being too slow or too fast, I gotta hear Knuckles continuously say this.
Just enough to pass.
Wait a second. I can not be good enough to pass? If I do that bad at a level, I have to go back to the start? Which just added a whole nother level of anxiety to playing. Don't you see what you did to me, Takashi Iizuka? It's your fault I turned out this neurotic. And so, one summer, I had enough. And no friends. I had to get over this fear. I couldn't let it consume me like this. And so I got good. I got really good at Sonic Heroes. And over the course of those 3 months, I got each and every single A rank in the game, which means playing through each stage basically 8 times over for the regular and special mission. I had finally conquered one of the cornerstones of my childhood. And so this led me to ask myself, what if I did this with every Sonic game? Went through each one and achieved every single A rank. Or S rank where applicable. So I sat down, ready to take on this Herculean feat. Then I proceeded to try an A-rank Sonic Adventure 2, got frustrated with having to play each stage 5 times, kept bumping into the walls on those fucking karting stages, and promptly quit. See, no two Sonic games tallies up your rank in the same way. You know, Adventure 2 is mainly about score, whereas Generations is primarily related to your time. And so if I were to do this, I would have to learn the ins and outs of each of these, 20 games. Jesus, I thought there'd be like 7. But whatever, the intro's already written. I'm committed to this. And so won't you join me in the endeavor of a lifetime, as I attempt to A-rank every single Sonic game ever. That has a ranking system, and if there are S ranks, I'll get those instead. And if a game has a drastically different port, I'll do that one too, because it's only fair. But first, I wanted to take some time to talk about today's sponsor, Aura. This video is sponsored by Aura. Did you know over 2.9 billion records were stolen from national public data, including a person's full name, address, phone number, and even social security number? I have one of those now, so I understand how important it is. So I sure am glad today's video is sponsored by Aura to help protect myself. Aura shows you which data brokers have been selling your info and automatically subs opt-out requests. They'll even give you fast fraud alerts for your bank account or if any other sensitive information has been compromised. Not only does this reduce the amount of spam you get, but also protects you from people who want to use your information to get into personal stuff, again, like your bank account. It's also this perfect all-in-one tool for transaction monitoring, VPN, antivirus, password manager, parental controls, and way more, all for an extremely affordable price. So stop data brokers from exposing your personal information and go to aura.com/AliceMark for a 2-week free trial and see how much of yours is being sold. Again, that's aura.com/AliceMark for a 2-week free trial, and thanks Aura for sponsoring this video. As I said earlier, Sonic Adventure was the first game to introduce the ranking system, but it's by far the most dramatically different take on it. See, every time you beat a level in SA1, it'll say you beat the C mission. That always confused me as a kid, as I had no idea where the fuck the B or A ones were. Turns out that when you go to the trial select and pick your desired stage from there, you'll automatically start in the B mission, and then upon beating that you get the A. This is a fun idea. Gives at least a slight reason to want to replay levels a few times over. But something I really wish they would have considered here was whether or not you beat these other missions on your first playthrough. Like for Sonic, his B mission is always to finish the stage with a certain amount of rings, and the A is always a time limit. So if on my first playthrough I finished the level with the desired rings or in the appropriate time frame, then I don't see why I couldn't automatically get all 3 at once. It seems a little like padding. This wouldn't work with every character though. For example, Teal's A mission changes up the stage slightly by giving you a harder foe to race against. Basically, it's a time limit with extra steps. But for the most part, with the majority of the characters in Sonic Adventure, I had a relatively painless experience getting all the A ranks. Operative words there being majority and relatively. Sonic is by far the campaign that takes the longest to finish with 10 whole levels. The characters below that are Teal's, Knuckles, and Gamma with 5. Amy only gets 3, the poor fucker. I had a really fun time replaying almost all these levels. I always forget how floaty Sonic controls in this game, but I personally love it. Emerald Coast and Windy Valley were pretty painless. Don't have to make much of an effort to beat all 3. Sorry, I'm just that good. The third stage, though, Casinopolis, is our first instance of bullshittery. But that's mostly because this level ain't all that fun to begin with. See, to get through this one, you have to collect enough rings through the pinball tables, so you can use them to then reach the Chaos Emerald that's sitting in a casino vault for some reason. What I hate so much about this level is that it actively rewards you for playing poorly. Getting enough rings through the pinball tables is a fucking slog. Not to mention the random chance of getting free Eggman, on the slots makes it immensely stressful. And so you're better off just getting as little rings there are as possible and falling down into the sewer, where there's ring capsules galore and you actively need to try to get hit. It's so easy. This also makes the B mission way more annoying. There's no challenge behind getting another 50 rings because that's all you can really do here. And so it's pretty much just a case of grabbing 400 rings, depositing it before getting the other 50 as it'll take that too, and then going back to the tables for a bit. Sky Deck was a nightmare though, and it's only due to the horrible collision, not helped by the constant threat of a bottomless pit beneath you. This fucking homing attack chain here was the bane of my existence. It felt like complete goddamn chance. But other than that, any issue I had with Sonic's campaign is something you're gonna have to face on any regular playthrough. Like Lost World has a shitty camera, the sky is blue. Like, it's Sonic Adventure, of course it's fun. But aside from those few annoyances, I'm practically just replaying the same stage 3 times over. Same goes for Teal's. I did not notice any real difference in how I approached these stages. Off to a great start. You know, the worst part about having to beat each of their stories before unlocking Trial Select is that I have to play that fucking terrible pacebreaker of a tornado mission 4 times total. Ugh. Generally, though, Teal's mission structure is the exact same as Sonic's. C is to beat him to the goal, B is to beat the stage with rings, and A is beating a harder version of Sonic. Or Eggman, in one case. I always loved the Sonic model they used for those icons. It always enamored me as a kid. The only real thing worth noting about this playthrough was how much more buggy I find it, much more than I remembered at least. In Casinopolis, I think Sonic got stuck. Well, that or he's just thinking some things over. And in Ice Cap, I was unfortunate enough to experience an issue you're gonna hear much more about in a video way in the distant future. And it's that the controller I'm using keeps fucking disconnecting at random points. So I should probably mention whenever Sonic game has a PC port is gonna be the version I'm playing through. But I'll be fucked if I ever touch the Steam version of Adventure again without the better SADX mod installed, which restores the game to a state more in line with its original Dreamcast counterparts, along with the widescreen too, which is nice. Whose bright idea was it to have that ugly-ass blue border in the Xbox port? That's horrible. But because of that, I'm playing through the game using a PlayStation controller connected to my PC with a USB cable. I can't figure out Bluetooth, I think I'm stupid. While I was playing though, my fucking dog was walking across the living room with no regard as to where they were going. I'm gaming here, and stepped right on it, which yanked the port while inside the controller. And so now it's forever bent and will occasionally disconnect me without warning as I frantically try to plug it back in before I ruin the run. Other than that though, Teal's story went by as smooth as can be. Sonic's story took me roughly 3 hours to A rank, whereas Teal's was over and done with in 1. Brilliant. Next we're on to Knuckles with our first major shakeup. Unfortunately, it ain't a good one. Don't get me wrong, beating each stage for the C rank is short and sweet. You gotta fly around these condensed versions of the action stages while looking for Master Emerald shards that are indicated to you through this hot and cold sensor at the bottom. And the B missions are completely doable. You can't use any of these to call hints, where I'd argue you might as well be doing that in the first place if you want to get any enjoyment out of these stages, as she quite literally just points you in their direction, removing any hunting aspect of these emerald hunts. The A missions are where things get fucked, as you are given a limit of 1 minute to find all 3 shards for every single stage. Except Skydeck, where you get 2. It's way too tight, and would be a lot more manageable if the emeralds didn't spawn in completely random locations each time you return to it. It's dumb luck. Meaning in some of these stages like Lost World, I was able to get the A rank first try, especially since you're able to at least use the hint balls this time. But in the stages where the zone is too large, like the very first one, Speed Highway, your chance of getting this done in a minute is slim, especially when you clip through the floor. Wonderful. Red Mountain, though, has to be the worst offender, with its more vertical-oriented level design making the process of getting to the top a massive time waster. It wouldn't even be that big a deal if it weren't for the fact that to restart these stages, you have to go all the way back to the main menu and reselect it. Don't get me wrong, there is an option to replay the stage, but in every case it simply takes you back to the previous checkpoint. And sadly, in the Knuckles stage's case, the checkpoint is when you last got an emerald. So if it takes you 40 seconds to get the first one, you realize you're not going to get the other 2 in time and decide to restart, you're just taken back to the 40-second first emerald. Great. I learned that the easiest way to go about this is to simply manipulate the system by purposefully not collecting any emerald pieces, just find where they are and restart the stage. Since a restart keeps them all in the same place, you can now just quickly go and grab them all. Would've been nice to know! Still though, I eventually got through it and managed to get through Knuckles' story in around an hour and 20 minutes. These aren't all taken into account the fucking 10-minute long credit sequence, by the way. Why do they make every character watch that? Amy, on the other hand, was mindless, over and done with in less than an hour. Her levels are by far the worst considering her lack of speed and Zero being a general nuisance. But I can get through this with minimal bitching. Like Sonic and Teals, B is rings and A is time. Hot Shelter and Final Egg took a few tries to get done, but for the most part, this was a mere blip. Gamma was thankfully also super easy to get through, it only took an hour. Which is crazy when you consider that like Teals and Knuckles, he too only has 5 levels. This is because all but the final one are incredibly short. When the B mission told me to get 50 rings in the first stage, I was baffled at the thought of there even being 50 rings here. It's over in like 20 seconds. The A missions are slightly more tough, however. With Gamma's levels being on a constant time limit, your goal here is to instead finish the level over a certain time, with you being able to gain back seconds on the clock through killing enemies. Most of these were fine, but Emerald Coast was surprisingly difficult. You need 3 minutes left on the clock for a stage that starts you with only 3 minutes. So you need to make sure you're chaining those attacks together consistently throughout, if you want to even have a hope of finishing this with more time than what you started with. Oh my god, are you serious? Hot Shelter being the longest stage by far had me initially worried that it would be the hardest to master, but nah, I got through this shit easy. I guess that only leaves us with one character. Something I'm glad we as a society are starting to mutually agree on is that big stages in Sonic Adventure are simple as fuck. In most cases, they can be finished in less than a minute. Aaron Hansen's skill, or lack thereof, for the longest time convinced folks these levels are some 40-minute endurance tasks. Of course, this is partially on the game for not conveying to the player in any way that what you're meant to do is hold down on the analog stick when Froggy latches onto your lure for an instant catch. I was done with Big Story in 20 minutes. So now tell me why there's an extra hour on this recording. Big's B mission was fine. In every big stage, the other fish surrounding you are nothing more than obstacles to get in your way as they want to bite on that lure themselves. But in Big's extra goals, you have to actually start pursuing them. B is to get 1,000 grams worth of fish total and then find Froggy. Easy. A mission is similar, get 2,000 grams and then catch him. Perfect. Simples.
Maybe next time.
Wait. Missed? The fuck you mean missed? What do you want about game? Are you high or something? Alright, guess I'll just do it again. Oh no. Oh no. I can't just get 2,000 grams worth of fish. I need to catch a single fish that weighs 2,000 grams. Fuck. At that one very moment, a horde of memories came flooding back. Memories of a 10-year-old me attempting this very mission for hours and hours over summers and Christmases, and just not being able to comprehend what I was doing wrong. That 1 hour of extra video wasn't how long it took me to beat the Twinkle Park A mission. It's how long I attempted to beat the Twinkle Park A mission. And so I tried, and failed, many, many times. I attempted to just do it in Ice Cap instead and see if Twinkle Park was a fluke, but no. It's not that I can't catch a 2,000 gram fish, it's that I can't even seem to find a 2,000 gram fish. I started big before Gamma, but got so frustrated that I just moved on to him to blow off some steam, quite literally, sorry monkeys. Enough time had passed that I just decided to look up the strategy, in which I learned that if you want any chance of a 2,000 gram fish even having the potential to show up, then you were going to need all of Big's lure upgrades to handle them. But even after that, this was still a huge struggle. Minutes and minutes on a single attempt at reeling one in, and that was after the slog of finding the damn thing. There was nothing more infuriating than getting through a really hard attempt at reeling in a fish, only for them to weigh 980 grams or some shit. It's a cruel joke. Never mind, I know what's more infuriating. It's going through a really hard attempt at reeling in a fish, trying for what feels like an eternity, only to accidentally have your finger slip and hold down the button for a fraction of a second too long and break the lure. In which the game will inform you that this was indeed a fish weighing over 2,000 grams that you almost got. Better luck next time. That's not to even mention that in a lot of these cases where the fish is in an enclosed area, if they're swimming away from you and hit a wall, this will happen. Why? This was the main factor keeping me from beating these things. The fucking fish constantly disappearing out of thin air and having to wait for another to spawn in. I didn't even bother recording half of these attempts because I knew damn well I'd have like 5 hours of Big's fishing footage for a video where I talk about it for 2 fucking minutes. But alas, the struggle finally ended and I was able to sleep peacefully that night. And that's every A rank in Sonic Adventure. I have no idea of the exact time it took me to do this, mainly because of Big, but if I were to assume based off memory, I'd say it was around 10 hours. Not too shabby. But overall, the experience of getting every A rank was mostly a breeze. Glad I was able to revisit one of my favorite games in a way I'd never attempted before. Fuck you, Big, I hate you now. Aaron was right. I got so infuriated by this fucking controller disconnecting that I just went on Amazon, waited a couple days for a super long HDMI cord to arrive, and then started playing Sonic Adventure 2 because I'll be fucked if I even think about attempting to A-rank any of these stages without the utmost control. Got that, dog? Again, I attempted to get all the emblems in this game as a kid because I desperately wanted to play the Green Hill Zone bonus level, but sadly, that never happened. And it ain't happening today either because I'm not touching the Chai Garden. I'm so happy I decided to do all A ranks and not all emblems for this video. Still, that doesn't mean this won't be a huge feat to accomplish, as Adventure 2 raises the goal here monumentally, having a grand total of 150 A ranks to get. They carried over the same gimmick from the first, where each stage has a variant with a slightly different goal depending on the character, except now instead of 3 there are 5. And on top of beating it, you also need to make sure it was efficient enough of a run to obtain the glorious A rank. This is tallied up at the end of the stage and depends on a few factors, mainly time, rings, and whatever score you got throughout, which revolves around defeating enemies and doing tricks. One thing to note here is that getting the A rank in a lot of these stages is fucking hard. When I was little, I felt like I could do the most perfect run an 8-year-old could do of Metal Harbor, but for the life of me, it was never good enough. Wasn't much easier in my 20s. By the end of my regular playthrough of the game, I actually surprised myself by obtaining 20 of the 30 possible A ranks, first try. But the rush of confidence that gave me didn't last long. So for Sonic, his mission structure goes like this. 1. Beat the level. 2. Get a certain amount of rings. Thankfully, the stage ends once you get the required amount, which is appreciated. 3 is a time limit. 4 makes you look around for a missing Chow, so make sure you get that Mystic Melody in Final Rush. And finally, Mission 5 is a hard mode version of the stage, which typically just entails spamming a few more enemies on the map. For the most part, I had a pretty smooth time. The main stages I struggled with for him were Metal Harbor and Pyramid Cave. Metal Harbor is infamous for having an incredibly hard to achieve A rank, not even in the hard mode, no, the regular run. Don't get me wrong, designing a Sonic game with a ranking system in mind has gotta be tough. You're quite literally limited in how many enemies or rings or trick jumps you can place because you have to take the score into account. But I think a little more time could have been taken on balancing these stages. Oh well, it's harder because you have to be quicker at the end to get to the upper level of the rocket for a bigger bonus. Don't you think I tried that? Oh, wonderful. Yeah, perfect. Pyramid Cave isn't anywhere near as bad, but it's still pretty annoying to get an A on. Half of my retries here were directly a result of how fucking buggy the game is. Sonic Adventure 2 has a lot of problems. I'll be the first to say it. And to be fair, this isn't something exclusive to it. We're gonna see this pop up a lot more in the future, I assure you. But Sonic games, they usually aren't the most polished things out there. That's fine. I accept that I still love a lot of these games. Because at the end of the day, these problems are usually just an occasional inconvenience. I can move past it. Unless I'm attempting to get the A ranks, in which these random little funny occurrences can really start to fucking get on your nerves. When trying to lightspeed dash up here to get the hidden chow, I find myself continuously flung past the pulley. Whoops, guess I should have been more careful. In the same mission, I can't seem to homing attack on the spring as this keeps happening. Whoops, guess I should have. If these were on an average playthrough, who cares? I'll take the E rank, I won't let it define me. But when I actively need a perfect run and you pull this shit, it gets a little annoying, I can't lie. Pyramid Cave's hard mode also has this super annoying expansion on that gimmick where you have to grab the thing and land it in the other thing to open the door. Now you have to do that while getting onto ledges that you can't jump to while holding it. You instead have to grab it, run as fast as you can, jump on this box perfectly, and then immediately jump again. All while getting ready to throw it at the exact right angle to get it to the next part. Do that twice, the second being way more difficult to pull off. This took me like an hour. It has the potential to kill your run. Again, it's not that I can't do it, it's doing it and getting an A rank that makes it so awful. What the fuck happened there? Still falling! At the end of the day, I did it, and that's all that matters. I can rest easy knowing I will never have to do this again for as long as I live. I've never seen the congratulations screen before, it almost makes me forget about the horrors I had to face to reach it. Ironically, Sonic was the character I ended up struggling with most when it came to the A ranks. Shadow, I thankfully had a much better time with, probably because he by far has the least amount of stages at a pathetic 4. Which I'm thankful for, as just about every Shadow level, aside from Skyreal maybe, feel like major step downs from Sonic. Radical Highway took me a while to get the A rank on, White Jungle is annoying as Mission 5 is quite literally unbeatable without the optional Flame Ring upgrade, so I got through a majority of the stage only to find out that I now have to quit Grit. The rail system surprisingly never really screwed me over in Skyreal. Oh god damn it. It was mainly everything else that fucked me. This took like an hour to get done. Oh fuck you. And Final Chase is gonna be annoying and long no matter what, so I was at least anticipating it to suck. I really hate when you get the electric shield in this game because it makes the lightspeed dash segments way more hit and miss. How did they not realize that? Either way, I got through Shadow with little to no trouble. And so that's us done with the speed stages. The mech levels are way easier to get through for the most part. I have to assume because of their more rigid design, it's a lot easier to take certain choices into account. For example, I noticed in Final Rush if you jump off a rail and do your trick, you get points. But only if you finish it by landing on the ground. With there oftentimes being rails at the end of these jumps, and I have to ask yourself if you'd rather sacrifice a couple seconds to land before continuing, or improve your time bonus by chaining together your rail jump. Whereas in the mech stages, you run and shoot, that's the gist of it. All of Teal's stages took a couple attempts at most. They were all fairly easy. I'm super glad the score bonus given to you from the gold beetles doesn't make or break a run or anything. They are so finicky to hit. I've never been the biggest fan of any Teal stages, so any problem I had with these already existed on the first playthrough. Most of them are pretty forgettable and boring, and they are way too heavy for the platforming they make you do. All you gotta do for the A rank is pay more attention to your combos, but most enemies are piled up together anyway, so there's not much skill involved in just holding down the action button for a couple extra seconds. Honestly, not even the karting stage gave me much grief, I was not expecting that. Most missions are the same as the other levels, but 3 is to get through it without hitting any cars, and 4 is to get through it without hitting any of the walls. 5 is just a hard mode though. I don't know how I think I Mandela affected myself into remembering Mission 5 being to get to the end without hitting any cars or touching the walls. So maybe that's why I had a better time with it than I was expecting. I mean, I beat the hard mode with only 2 seconds left and still got an A. Amazing. Eggman is mostly the same, although he by far gets the more engaging level gimmicks. The most infuriated I got with him was with the poor collision. Ugh. I hate the way the mech interacts with the side of objects and walls. For some reason, it makes them skyrocket downwards like they're made of metal. It's still annoying. Again, this is a slight annoyance on a regular playthrough, but when going for the A, it is unforgivable. Like, I didn't do that, I swear! Getting the A rank in Sand Ocean was a struggle, just for the regular mission. You need to do such a damn near perfect run that it was another I didn't even get to record me finishing. I would simply come back to the game every day and try a couple attempts before getting pissed off and doing something else. I literally got the A rank while sitting on the phone waiting to leave for an event. Great, I couldn't even capture the moment I beat it. Wonderful. Definitely the most fun levels to A rank with Eggman are Weapons Bed and Cosmic Wall. With Weapons Bed, there's so many enemies around that it's fun to get to see how many you can target at once before shooting. Although it is yet another ruined by how annoying the collision is. That section at the end when the robots come from the sky to shoot at you on narrow-ass platforms always has the chance to be my mortal enemy on any given playthrough. And Cosmic Wall because its anti-gravity mechanic is incredibly fun, getting to fly way into the sky. Despite having the largest score requirement by far at 80,000 points, with the hard mode needing a whopping 100,000, I always have a good time on this one, and that's Eggman over with. Knuckles and Rouge's stages are what I was dreading the most, for obvious reasons. I'm sure we're all aware of the fact that Adventure 2 heavily restricts the Emerald radar by only highlighting the location of one at a time, meaning you can be walking right on top of an emerald without even knowing. But surprisingly, they were the two characters to give me the least amount of trouble. It's shocking because every time I want to replay this game, it is always a Knuckles or Rouge stage that reminds me of why I'm not a fan of the overall package here. Knuckles was a breeze though. I A-ranked a lot of these on my first try. The two missions to consistently test me though were the rings, shockingly, and hard mode. Rings because with some of these levels being really open and not setting you on a linear path, you really do have to figure out what's the optimal way to get all 100 rings before then trying to do that as fast as humanly possible. The hard mode at the very least sounds like it would be easier, since the 3 emerald shards are always in a fixed position, but they fucking hide these things and challenge you in a way the game never before attempts. In some ways, I can appreciate that because the fixed position allows the designers to make more linear challenges in order to obtain them, but on the other hand, through a fucking hidden spring, really? Some of these are cruel. I have no clue how anybody managed to find these without a guide. I sure as hell didn't. If you ever want to attempt this, be sure to get Knuckles' glasses and Meteor Herd, by the way, because it is mandatory for a lot of these half the time. Because the way to get the shard is through something that's invisible. Sometimes I got dumb luck on my side, like Mission 4 of Meteor Herd going by in a minute, but other times I was on these things for like an hour. Okay, I want to give you a rundown on the hard mode version of Death Chamber, and you tell me if you could have figured this out on your own. So when you enter the level, take a left right away. Follow that path until you find this painting to enter. You then want to find this hidden hourglass to unlock the floor in the middle of the room, and dig for the key before it closes or else you'll have to restart your run. After that, make your way to the center of the area and go towards the blue section. Find this Mystic Melody on the ground and swim to the bottom. Swim through this area and flip this hourglass to open a different door, and swim to the other end before another door closes. Then get to the end of the hallway and go immediately up, which the camera never shows you. Climb to the top of this and flip this switch you're never shown, and then go all the way back down to the water to unlock this floor for the key. This took a couple tries. Finally, we want to go up to the middle section in which you'll find the final key behind this box. Well, at least that one was generous. Comparatively, Rouge was a cakewalk aside from the obvious. Security Hall isn't anywhere near as challenging as folks make it out to be. Egg Quarters, though, might be worse than Knuckles. The hard mode literally requiring you to grab those monkey bombs they throw you. Bet some of you didn't even know you could pick them up. It was mainly just Route 208 and Mad Space I struggled with. It's way harder to drift while not hitting walls in this one, while still trying to get the A rank at least. Fuck you! And Mad Space is a nightmare no matter what. It was the first time I saw the C grid on this playthrough. It's complete luck whether or not you get a good combination enough for the A. It took me an hour and 10 minutes to get through all 5 missions. Screw this level. Thankfully, that only leaves us with the last story, which consists of a single stage. Unfortunately, it's also one of the hardest to get an A on. I got a D on my first attempt. I'm one of those crazy people who can beat Canon's Core without Knuckles' air necklace, but for the sake of the ranking, I think I need to finally swallow my pride and get it to speed things up. This was still the level that took me the longest to get through though, at an hour and 20 minutes. I was actually shocked at how different the Chow mission was here. Starting with Eggman, you gotta make sure you're able to fly over this presumably inaccessible door and use this Mystic Melody to do something. Then with Rouge, you can now enter this doorway and use her Mystic Melody. Now, you can jump up here with Knuckles and use his Mystic Melody. And finally, with Sonic, you can lightspeed dash up here to enter this area for the Chow. Fuck you, Teals, I guess. And with that, I'm finally done Sonic Adventure 2. Not counting my initial playthrough of the story, it took me roughly 4 hours to get through Sonic, 2 hours and 45 minutes for Teals, 2 hours 40 for Knuckles, 2 for Shadow, 2 hours 45 for Rouge, one of those hours being Mad Space, 3 for Eggman, and finally an hour and 20 for the last story. When adding in my first playthrough of the Hero and Dark story, that leaves us with a grand total of 17.5 hours to get every A rank in Sonic Adventure 2. Not nearly as impossible as I once thought, just really tedious. Finally, the Bio Lizard. So what's next? Okay, here we go, the game that started this entire endeavor. It's funny because I feel most people out there would shiver in fear at the thought of having to get every A rank in Sonic Heroes, but for me, it's just another day of the week. I do this at least once a year. People are so averse to this because each team's playthrough in Heroes is almost the exact same experience, minor differences withstanding. Meaning you basically have to play the game 4 times over. Well, how about we now double that? I never knew what these were for as a kid, the question mark emblem next to the regular stage on Challenge Select. But this is where it's revealed to you that each team has an alternate goal to achieve on every level, meaning you basically have to A-rank each stage twice, 4 times over, resulting in a nice and tedious 8 playthroughs. I mean, let's be grateful that it lessened the missions from 5 to 2, could you imagine having to do this 20 times? Not that I give a shit, I love this game, it's quite possibly my favorite game ever, and only a tiny part of that is due to nostalgia. Heroes has a lot of quirks to get past, and it's certainly not a conventional platformer by any means, with its unique team-based gameplay taking a bit of getting used to. But I actually think it's one of the few 3D Sonic games to translate the classic fundamentals relatively smoothly. The more you play, the better you get. The better you get, the easier it becomes to string together moves and swap characters on the fly, and the more you understand the rock, paper, scissors mechanic, the easier it becomes to get through hordes of enemies with ease and get to upper pathways. I don't care that I have to play it another 7 times, I would've done that anyway. Getting through that initial playthrough was simples. Only thing I have to consider this time is that boss fights actually give you a rank now, but thankfully it's all time-based and I've fought the Hedgehog a bazillion times. The only boss that really gave me any trouble were the character battles, and it's because they're basically down to luck. This is the one section where the game unequivocally just doesn't work. They want you to use the rock, paper, scissors system to continue switching to whatever character is best against the opposing team, but it's so finicky and you can never tell if you're doing the right move, and so it's just best to spam the tornado attack until they fly out of there. See ya. I have to imagine there's a bunch of segments here that should bother the hell out of me, kicking and screaming at how unfair it is. But again, I've played this so many times that I know what to avoid. Like the end of Mystic Mansion as Team Sonic. There's this part where you have to homing attack across these transparent pumpkin ghosts as Sonic, and this used to always kill me for years. No matter how many times I tried, I would just keep seemingly clipping through them. That was until I realized that Sonic's homing attack gives you a lot more wiggle room than you'd think before you need to perform it again. You have plenty of time to wait in the air for the ghost to fully appear before safely getting across. Sure, it's not conveyed to you all that well, but I can never not do it like this now. Also, I will forever intrinsically attack in the opposite direction first to get Tails and Knuckles away from me, because their AI can accidentally target one of them before you and make them disappear as you're approaching. Good game. This is where Sonic's homing attack peaked in my opinion. They really exaggerated how much airtime you can get with it, which helps immensely with chaining them together, and especially with platforming. If you homing attack an enemy regularly, you just shoot up for a second like you'd expect before falling. But if you continue holding down the jump button, you can get some major airtime. I recall I had a friend who kept getting so mad at this game and thought it sucked. But as soon as I told him about this, he got way better at it and didn't have nearly as many bullshit deaths. Like that, okay, fuck you. By the end of my regular Team Sonic playthrough, I got all but 3 A ranks. Team Rose was all A's first try. The only part of this game I ever dread is Team Chaotic's Hang Castle enemy gauntlet. See, because combat has a much greater focus here, there's 2 bosses for every team that consists of dropping you in an arena, and you needing to beat all the oncoming enemies in a fast enough manner to get the A rank. Sounds easy, right? Well, yeah, it is. Except for Team Chaotix's Hang Castle. It's all fine for the most part, but there is this one segment that consistently messes me up. And it's this moment where you have to jump in a cannon as the power type and manually aim to shoot yourself into the distance to destroy the flapper robots. It is so slow and takes so long to get back and try again that you realistically only have a couple times to try this before you may as well restart. And this is with using the Team Blast on every other horde. Because their attack gives you a ring capsule for each enemy blown up, it's pretty easy here to consistently have Team Blasts ready for the entire match. But even with that, you're still on a tight-ass time limit for shooting these guys. And that's not even to mention the Hawk robots flying across the screen that you also need to destroy, meaning I have to drill the delay into my mind, how long it takes from you shooting out the cannon to actually landing on them. All that being said, got it first try. In the regular stages, however, I think getting the A ranks in Heroes is relatively straightforward. It's one of those things where it's just, like, muscle memory for me now, so describing how to do it doesn't go much further than be fast, kill enemies, and don't die. No shit. Each character type has a different score tally at the end, with a couple extra points being awarded depending on how many power cores they've obtained, but I don't think it really matters much who you've played most. Because of that, I also find just about every extra mission a simple case of replaying the level again. For Team Sonic and Rose, that is. So the way it works here is that each team has a different objective for their extra mission. Team Sonic is a time limit, Team Dark is having to defeat 100 enemies, Team Rose is gathering 200 rings, and Team Chaotix well, we'll get to them. Team Rose has it the easiest. Not only because this game is pretty generous with the rings, take the normal amount a Sonic level has and multiply it by 3 since they love doing that lineup shit so often, but also because your score isn't taken into account. Getting the A rank is only a matter of how quickly you got those rings, and it's for that reason I barely even remember doing this. It took me like an hour. Team Sonic was also easy as fuck. I got all A's first try. Hold the applause. Some of the time limits are worse than others, but for the most part, it's just a case of replaying the stage and making sure I defeat enough enemies to still get the A rank. Team Dark was where things started getting tiresome, for lack of a better term. The main factor in that being, there are stages in here that don't even have 100 enemies. Thankfully, like Team Rose, you only have to worry about your time, but at the same time, 100 enemies? This does rarely mean you have a slightly shorter playthrough of a level. You know, for a stage like Ocean Palace, I managed to end it before the rock chase sequence. But in Seaside Hill, I defeated every enemy in sight, got to the very end, and now I have to take a teleporter all the way back to the beginning so all the robots would respawn and I can get those last few. This is where I started having those Sonic Adventure 2 moments, where those fun little quirks became really annoying. Not even gonna let the game have the satisfaction of killing me here. In Bingo Highway, I lost Rouge somehow by the end of the stage, and so Shadow and Omega went in their own little adventure for a while. I wasted a ton of time in Real Canyon, and on top of that, there was nothing more annoying than finally getting like 99 enemies only for something like this to happen. But I guess it's tradition for me now to leave the worst until last. Because I beat everything in here in the span of 2 or 3 days, but even as someone who likes this game, I took a week-long break to prepare myself for what was to come. The Team Chaotix extra missions. I'm like screaming. So I'm sure we're all aware of the Team Chaotix missions in Sonic Heroes, them forcing you to not go to the end of the level, but instead to achieve some varied goal, like catching 10 hermit crabs scattered around the stage, or use Espio's invisibility to avoid getting detected by frogs. Well, these are bad enough. Not undoable. Honestly, I think most are fairly straightforward and generous with the amounts. For example, in Seaside Hill, like I said, you have to collect 10 hermit crabs, but thankfully, the stage has like 20, so there's at least some leeway there. Okay, now find those other 10. That's the extra mission. Some of these missions, to be fair, aren't too shabby. Frog Forest is to avoid the frogs while getting under a certain time limit. Cool. Egg Fleet is also to just avoid robots. I can do that. Real Canyon's just a time limit. Simple. In theory. But there are certain missions that are just so fucked that despite me having beat them like a dozen times over the years, I always forget what to do in at least a few. Do not attempt these without a guide. You can do it, don't get me wrong, but it is not worth the countless replays needed to not only do it, but also do it well enough for the A rank. It is a nightmare. So let's highlight a couple, shall we? You know, I wouldn't even mind that much if it were more balanced, like it starts easy and gets gradually harder as we go, but nope. Team Chaotix's final missions are arguably some of their easiest, yet one of the more tough ones is Seaside Hill. Find 20 hermit crabs? Yeah, how about you find me a reason to? Oh yeah, the video. They're just so tiny and hard to notice, and they're always under platforms or hidden off the side of a wall, in a stage with a bunch of alternate paths that no matter how many times I try, I always miss at least one. And it's usually a case where I'll play the stage and only find 19, restart and try again only to get another 19, but it's never the same 19 crabs. I usually always find the one I was missing on another playthrough, only to wind up forgetting another. It's like my brain can't care enough to remember all 20 locations at any given time. Fuck this one. The Golden Turtle one in Power Plant takes a good bit of memorization. Bingo Highway is awful unless you know specifically where to go. There are also so many chips that you have to get on the tables, you having to be so accurate on these things. But the game didn't really start to get on my nerves until Real Canyon and Bullet Station. Real Canyon should be fine. The time limit is a little tight, but whatever, I'm just getting to the end. However, there was this one specific moment that kept sending me off the rails time and time again. I played this level so much that I just stopped recording footage at a certain point, but I cannot tell you how many times I would just press the jump button and then I would clip straight downwards to my death. And Bullet Station by far has the worst mission, forcing you to destroy 50 of these shadow capsules throughout the stage. So many are hidden by switches or force you to aim the camera backwards to find secret areas. Again, I cannot stress enough how badly you should use a guide for these. It's not worth the headache, because you can know where each and every single one of these things are, but the game will still pull some shit like this. Hang Castle's 10 keys is dreadful, but I barely even remember it because I'm too busy loathing Mystic Mansion instead. In the original mission, you have to use your tornado attack to blow out all the orange flames. Now, you have to blow out all the blue ones, which are not as obvious to make out because in your other 7 playthroughs of this level, they've been mere set dressing. Sometimes they're giant and in the middle of the room. Those ones count. Sometimes they're tiny and appear on the lances of these stone statues after you pass them. Those sure as hell count. And sometimes... well, sometimes they just wanted to fuck with you. That's as bad as it gets, thankfully. I struggled a tad with Final Fortress, but weirdly enough, it wasn't even finding the 10 keys. It was getting the A rank. On my first go, I beat this thing in less than 3 minutes, which is insane. Yet that, for some reason, only constitutes a C. So now I have to map my route around the level to get every key, while making sure I go back to the lower areas to also destroy the robots. Perfect. But hey, at least I'm done. One simple playthrough of the final boss metal overlord for an easy A later, and that is finally every A rank in Sonic here. What do you mean get every A rank? What the fuck have I been doing all week? Oh, I forgot to beat Team Dark's final 2 stages. Damn. You know, it took me dying in the final level to realize that since all of Team Dark's extra missions only are time-based, then that means I didn't have to restart when I died. It only just screws up the score. Well, shit, now I figure it out. Also, I forgot to mention, because it's so second nature to me now, I forget this isn't like an actual move you can do. But if you see me doing this weird thing where the flight character shoots up with this weird glitchy effect around them, it actually is a glitch. If you press the switch character button and the attack one at the same time, it makes the character freak out and fill up your Team Blast meter way quicker. It's super helpful in the chaotic stages for ring bonuses, and with Team Dark, their chaos control also freezes the timer, making it way easier to get a better bonus for that too. So use it. Sonic Heroes is great, chaotics, extra missions withstanding, do a remake and don't fuck it up, Sega, please. Oh yeah, Heroes took me 15 and a half hours to beat. I didn't record the final boss, so I had to replay it. That's why it's near 16 now. Oh boy, here we go. What I'd argue to be the first bad game in this endeavor. Shadow the Hedgehog. This was one of the Sonic games I owned that, despite having a ranking system, I never gave a shit about what grade I got. Could not care less. I think it's because of how convoluted some of the missions already were to beat on their own, that the thought of having to replay any of them made me want to kill myself. I could barely even comprehend the whole pick your path thing until years after I gave a shit about it. I mean, how could Kid Me not understand this handy guide? What was I, stupid or something? Yeah, if you're also stumped by the side of this thing, well, Shadow the Hedgehog evolves upon the clear fan favorite part of Sonic Heroes, that being the Team Chaotix missions, with every stage having between 2 to 3 different goals to accomplish while going through a level, ranging from good to bad. If you do the evil mission, you go upwards, and if you do the hero mission, you go down. You have the ability to interweave these different stories to figure out who Shadow is. Good guy or asshole. The story wasn't built around it, character alliances constantly flip-flop all over the place, the president has a picture of Sonic and Shadow on his desk. It's a mess. But don't worry, because the gameplay is even worse. We're building upon the Heroes gameplay style despite these stages being a lot more focused on backtracking and exploration. Yeah, pull from the slippiest Sonic game, that sounds great. And you know what, they went a step further by somehow making it even slippier. I can deal with the speed characters in Heroes. You can say all you want that I'm just used to it or looking past how bad it is. That's just something I can never agree on. They control fine. I cannot fathom how any one of the 8,170,142,087 people on God's green earth could even remotely think that Shadow's controls are even an improvement on Heroes, let alone good on their own. Turning in this game scares me. If you slightly turn the analog stick with even a modicum of speed, you're flying off the edge. It sucks. Disagree with me all you want, but I'll sleep easy tonight knowing I'm right. Also, guns. They're fun. Anyways, I'd initially assumed that all I had to do for the A rank here was to get it once in the stage, you know, it was an overall rank. But no, that would be a little too convenient. Yeah, you have to get an A rank for every individual mission. Now that may not sound so bad, I mean a potential 3 missions a stage is a whole lot less than Adventure 2 at 5. And you would think that. But some of these missions can go on for tens of minutes. And if you wind up dying to some shit that's not your fault, or God forbid miss a single objective when you're asked to kill like fucking 60 gun soldiers in a stage that only has 60, you now have to go all the way back to the beginning and start the process over again. My strategy here is to do as many unique routes as I can on my initial playthrough, just to open up all the levels on stage select if I need to replay them. There's 10 potential endings in Shadow, but only 5 branching paths to get there, so you already have to accept the reality of playing each stage at least twice if you want to be smart about it. Westopolis, on the other hand, has to be beaten 10 fucking times, Jesus. But no matter what, I accept that I'm gonna have to return to at least a good handful of these stages at least once. Surprisingly, by the time I'd gotten all 10 endings, I managed to obtain 49 of the potential 71 A ranks, which they thankfully kept a tally of up here. And so while getting the last 22 comparatively doesn't sound that bad, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And so for the sake of brevity, I'm gonna highlight to you all the most memorable ones. Westopolis isn't that good or bad of a stage on its own, but again, you have to play this fucker 10 times just to beat the game, so you bet your ass it was memorable. I got a B in my first run of the neutral path, which is always just to get to the goal. I was beating up enemies left and right, so I had no idea what I was doing wrong. After playing through it a couple times, though, I came to the realization that to get the A rank on neutral, all you gotta do is beat the stage fast enough. You're lucky to get a couple thousand points from other factors like rings and whatnot, but the time bonus can go up to like 30,000, it's insane. Also, I'm pretty sure the A rank is for 30,000 points, so, you know, you're golden. I think what I hate most about Westopolis is that it makes no effort in naturally having you get accustomed to its missions. The dark here is to defeat being their rated T way of saying kill, 35 gun soldiers. Just how many are there total? 35. The hero mission is to defeat 45 black arms. Just how many are there? 40. It's a nightmare, and you have to do it at least once to get to the upper and lower levels that are only accessible through this method. If there's one thing I can at least say as a consistent saving grace about Shadow the Hedgehog, it's that this is by far the easiest Sonic game to get A ranks on. All you need to keep in mind is that when you're doing the Dark Mission, do not even attempt to do any aspect of the hero objective. And vice versa, as when your score is tallied at the end, that take away points for working on the other team. Shadow the two-faced fuck. If you just focus on your objective and get it done relatively quickly, you're fine. The worst one here is definitely the Dark Mission though. All because there is one fucking robot that flies towards you during the free fall at the very end of the stage. So not only do you need to make sure you save enough ammo to spam bullets at it, not only do you need to make sure you're predicting the right place it'll be flying up at, but also, if you miss it and go back to the checkpoint teleporter, there's a chance that it just won't respawn again. And so I have to teleport to the checkpoint before that one and run through that section again to ensure it respawns. And this is only level 1! Glyphic Canyon perfectly encapsulates this game's awful sense of progression, as both of its missions are easier than level 1. Dark is to touch 5 of these things that are usually on the main path, and while the hero is to defeat a certain amount of enemies again, there are more than your required amount. Who decided this? Why is it easier? I think Lethal Highway is one of the better designed levels in Shadow, mainly in that it actually feels like a Sonic stage. It's also one of those levels that only has 2 missions, which makes it a little more bearable. But the hero involves chasing down this alien ship and shooting it until it's destroyed, but it always stays on the top path, meaning you have to make sure you're using these ramps to cross large gaps or watch out for the ground collapsing, or else you risk falling to a lower path and waiting longer to reach him again. This level would be awesome if Shadow didn't control like shit. Cryptic Castle is a cool stage with a unique mission, always forget about the giant skeleton spider at the end. But here we meet Amy, who wants us to find Cream and Cheese who are lost. Cream is simple and notify you when you're close to her she somehow got stuck behind a wall, and then you enter this giant room with a million char. Which one is Cheese? Well, this one way over here. Wonderful. Death Ruins fucking sucks. You have to defeat 50 aliens here. It took me ages of replaying this one over and over again, going back and forth through the checkpoints, constantly just trying to find that last. Central City is this atrocious maze level that is way too big. The only redeeming quality of it is that in the Dark Mission where you have to detonate the bombs, you're basically seeing an entirely different side of the level. It ain't good, but again, different. I gotta talk about the bosses for a bit too. They are atrocious. They either go by way too quickly or they last forever with no end in sight. There were some of these that would take like 5 minutes to beat, but if you want the A rank, you gotta be quicker. They typically scatter a scarce amount of guns around the arena, but you have to be super accurate when you want to use them, because once they're gone, they're gone. Also, be sure not to use it when the enemy has their invincibility frames activated, which is rarely telegraphed to you. Oh boy. The only cool boss fight in this entire game is Heavy Dog, and that's just because it's shown to be the guy who killed Mario. I even play the Sonic Adventure 2 music. It reminded me that this was a Sonic game for a second. There's like 6 or 7 bosses total, and they make you fight each of them like 3 times over during a 10-story playthrough. It's so repetitive. The main one that gave me grief was this iteration of the Egg Breaker, and it's because I could beat this thing as fast as I could in like 30 seconds, and it still wasn't good enough for the A. I played this thing over and over again, only to realize that I completely completely overlooked these turrets right here that make the thing a total joke over in 12 seconds. Anyways, Mad Matrix is also a drag. They have 4 terminals you need to access, each of which takes forever to get through. It took me like 8 minutes to beat this one, and I still got the A. They knew. I think I might be crazy for preferring the Dark mission to it, where you have to stay in the center of those terminals and zip around these circuits, trying to locate and destroy 30 bombs. It's just really tedious, but again, I didn't use a guide and took ages on it, yet still got the A. I think I just took solace in knowing I never have to do this again. The arc stages are infamously the worst in the game too for how giant and maze-like they are. They're fine to get through normally, but the missions are consistently awful. In the Doom, you have to pick up these heal tanks and throw them on top of injured scientists, or whatever these are. And while I usually struggle with this one a lot, I got through it first try without a guide. Yay! Lost Impact is infinitely worse, where you have to destroy 35 of these chaos creatures. Cool continuity and all, but some of these things are fucking hidden. Not to mention they have these long-ass reel segments that go on forever. Like the Chaotix Extra missions in Heroes, it's one of those things where no matter how many times I do this, I will never not miss at least a couple. In Final Haunt's Dark mission, you have to activate these shields to open alternate routes, which doesn't sound too bad, but there are moments in here where you need ammo to kill aliens to open some doors, over what's essentially a bottomless pit, meaning fat chance I'm home and attacking over this. So not only does the game force me to kill aliens and decrease my score as a result, but the auto-aim makes it near impossible to exclusively shoot at the gun soldiers. It's too easy to lose score here, I got a D first try. Black Comet similarly kept putting me in a position where I had to die. This was another slog to get through. I got an E.
What are you doing, you traitor?
You broke my transportation, where else was I to go? Quite possibly the best stage in Shadow is Lava Shelter, and believe you me, that's not saying a lot. The Dark mission is one of the more unique ones where you have to help Eggman activate his lair's defenses, which actually changes the level design as the lava rises and creates alternate paths to escape. Felt like I should at least throw one positive in there. And, that's kinda it. I bothered playing through the final story you unlock for beating the other 10, weeded through the 50 million cutscenes each with their own loading screen, spammed Chaos Control to no end, only to see that there wasn't even a ranking. Joy. Decided I would beat the terrible final boss for the sake of it, and with that, I was finally done with Shadow the Hedgehog, all 71 A ranks. Sorry this segment was all over the place, organizing the notes for this one was a mess. But really, aside from a few specific missions that made me want to tear my hair out, the process of getting every A rank in Shadow was a breeze. It was simply a case of beating the stage most of the time, there wasn't even much strategy involved. Which may be disappointing to the completionists out there who want a challenge from their kids' games and to scam people with embezzling charity money. But for a game as awful as Shadow the Hedgehog, a series of easy A ranks is all I could ask for. Again, by the end of my first run-through, I had already gotten 15 out of the 22 Hero A ranks, 9 out of the 22 Normal A ranks, and 13 out of 22 Dark A ranks, with 10 missions not even being attempted by that point. For now, though, it appears we gotta take our first detour for the video before moving on to the next mainline Sonic game. By this point, the ranking system became a staple of the series no matter what entry. And so next, it seems we gotta move on to our first spin-off. I'm so sorry you have to look at the gameplay like this, there was no other way I could display it. Sonic Rush, released in 2005. First game to introduce Blaze the Cat, also one of the rare times you can actually play as Blaze the Cat, along with being the first game featuring Eggman Nega. There were like 4. It's strange, despite the DS being my first handheld, and I think being the first gaming thing I had all to myself after the PlayStation 2 because my parents got my older sister one, and I would not stop badgering her for it, and despite having a ton of games for the thing, Sonic Rush wasn't one of them until years later. I think I picked it up in a charity shop for like £5 in 2013. Not that I hadn't played it before, in fact, I think Rush might be one of my first Sonic games, ironically. It just so happened I was like 5 years old and could not comprehend the level of speed and reaction times the game expected from me. I think I borrowed it from one of my parents' friends' sons for a week, couldn't get past Water Palace, and forgot all about it for years until walking by it in the store and saw this label in the box art with a Mario star and said, 92%, the best Sonic game ever. Damn. Well, if it's good enough for Mario. Now, Sonic Rush was, funnily enough, the first Sonic game to introduce the elusive S rank, which I'm pretty sure is going to be a staple of every game in this video going forward. There's just something about it that seems so much cooler. I did better than the best. Thanks, game. I was so used to playing Colors and Generations that when I would go back and play Adventure 2 for the first time, I always thought the A rank was so lame. Why is it pink? What am I? A girl? And alright guys, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to give you a slight spoiler for later in the video. Please avert your eyes if you don't want to have the immersion of me getting every A rank in every Sonic game ever, or S rank where applicable, ruined. So I was playing Sonic 06 before Sonic Rush because the Xbox store was closing and I had to download it quick. Fast forward a month and I'm still trying to beat the piece of shit. And so I got so mad at one level in particular that I was like, why the fuck am I even playing Sonic 06? Rush was next! Foolishly thinking I could just do a detour for a day and beat Rush before getting back to it. Then I got stuck on Sonic Rush for an entire week. This game is hard. Okay, well, not really hard, just inconsistent. Which is strange to say considering Sonic Rush might be one of the most consistent games in the franchise. Each zone has 2 acts, then a boss fight against Eggman or Eggman Nega doesn't really make a difference. There's only 7 zones, then a final boss for each story, and then a final boss where you play as both Super Sonic and Burning Blizz. And for the most part, Sonic Rush is a blast. It's got an insane sense of speed, and excellently makes use of the newfangled boost system, where you can hold on a button to continuously be propelled forward as long as you have enough boost in your meter. Really, the worst thing you can say about Sonic Rush is that its developer, Dimps, rely way too much on bottomless pits in place of actual challenge, which are especially annoying given how fast you are and how quickly some of these things blindside you due to the severe screen crunch. You know, having the bottom screen is nice and all, but it doesn't really help me see what's ahead. Like that. Now, Sonic Rush may be fairly easy when getting from the start to the end, but when going for the S ranks, it becomes a whole different Mr. Beast. I can't make Mr. Beast jokes anymore. It has never taken me this many attempts to get the S rank in level 1 in one of these games so far. I was at this for like a fucking hour, and I still didn't get it. Part of me felt like I was doing this the best I could, but another part of me felt like I was forgetting something. I'm really struggling for boost. I feel like no matter how many times I try, I can never manage to see the 3rd level of the bar. And that's when I realized, oh yeah, the trick system. What I would like to think is an evolution of the trick jumps in Adventure 2, but given the developer, it's most likely an evolution on the gimmick from Advance 2. Rush gives you the ability to press the shoulder buttons to do a trick, which not only gives you points, but can also boost you in whatever direction you desire. Although the ones you mainly want to focus on are shooting to the right and shooting upwards to get to higher platforms. It then took me even longer to remember that I could just spam the shit out of the shoulder button to do as many tricks as I want before touching the grind. Everything gives you the opportunity in this game. The springs, stage gimmicks, pulleys. I guess I just need to be, tricking whenever I can. Alright, fair, that was my fault. S rank should be a piece of cake now. What? What else could I do? I feel like I beat the stage as best I could, and I wasn't even being a dumbass this time and forgetting integral parts of the gameplay. I tried this for what felt like forever, over the span of multiple days. As I continued playing, I started getting S ranks more frequently. Very rarely on my first playthrough, but it did happen sometimes. Okay, it happened once, but the others weren't far off, and so I guess maybe the requirement in level 1 was just a fluke. Fine, I'll come back to it. The second I got into the first boss, I was reminded of how much I hated them, how long it would take me to defeat a single one. The 3D is cool, it has that old DS charm to it, but by God, do these things drag. The bosses are all fairly repetitive, going between the same 2 to 3 attack patterns, which is typical. But some of these things go on forever. On a regular playthrough, I can deal with that. You know, I'm playing Sonic Rush in the year 2024, where else do I have to be? However, when going for the S rank, you need to beat these things as fast as humanly possible. And even worse, you need to keep all your rings in a lot of cases. Which in a normal Sonic game wouldn't be hard, you know, if you get hit you just pick them back up again, who cares? But Sonic Rush wants to be different. And so the rings follow an entirely different system. A system that I like, by the way. The biggest criticism towards rings in Sonic is why would I ever need more than one if I can just pick it up again right after? And Sonic Rush is one of the few games to try and address this. How? Well, for every time you get hit, your rings will fly away from you further and further. That's genius. There's now an actual incentive to not just run into enemies all the time. In this game, though, it's a nightmare. I feel like the first 2 to 3 passes are manageable, I can get at least a couple rings back, but after that, hell no, they're flying all over the fucking place. Which at the very least I can tolerate in a stage where I can just find more, but in a boss fight taking place on a tiny platform above a bottomless pit, fuck you, they're as good as gone. So you're best just to start the boss by collecting 1 ring and avoiding the rest like the plague until you're on the last hit. But even then, sometimes that's just not enough. You need all the rings for an S rank, and so now you have to learn these patterns to a T. The Water Palace boss I find insanely hard to S rank. I could never get the timing on dodging these attacks, but Huge Crisis wound up being the one that took me the longest. I had to quit at a certain point and just come back the next day to tackle it again. And the worst part is, it is entirely out of your control whether or not you get the S. Get this, the boss is a repeat of the first one, sounds simple, but he has this one attack where he goes into the background to shoot missiles at you, and this right here lasts around 20 seconds. Eventually I figured out that since he does this attack 3 times, you have just enough of a bonus there to get the S rank. Alright, just keep my rings and dodge his attacks. Except, sometimes he'll randomly decide, oh, I did 3 attacks? Well, a 4th couldn't hurt. And so now he wastes another 20 seconds going through the attack animation, and with that you might as well just quit the stage and start over because you're not getting it. This consistently got in my way. And what's worse is there were so many times I'd get to the last hit, but I would be so stressed about messing it up at the last moment that I would mess it up at the last moment. The worst boss, though, just for how long it takes, would have to be the final of each character's story going against this giant robot. By the way, I didn't mention it yet, but these things take 8 hits, and if you die once, back to the beginning. He just does so much shit, and it's doable. That might be the worst part, honestly. It's not up to chance like Huge Crisis's boss, it's just pure skill. But half his attacks are instant kills. It's so easy to lose your rings and have them fly away, and the whole gimmick is he does 1 of 3 attacks, moves to the left side, and then you run up his arms while avoiding rolling bombs and latching onto it while he tries to shake you off. But to even get to that point, you not only have to survive their previous attack, but get through it without losing a single ring. If you get hit by this attack, his pattern resets and does another one. Now don't get hit by that, and then he'll move to the side. It's bullshit. But if this happens to you once and you lose your rings, just restart, because you could not be expected to survive 8 at minimum of these attacks without getting hit again. This took forever. This attack right here where he shoots out a laser surrounding you that's slowly moving left and right was disgusting. Mainly because the game kept lagging when he did it, and so everything would frantically speed up again randomly, and I'd get hit. Great! Now there's a likely chance he's gonna do that same move again. And wonderful, because I got hit, my rings flew outside the lasers. So now even if I could get them back, it means having to go through the laser, which, oh yeah, kills me. But you might as well do that because there's no way you're surviving the rest of this boss fight with no rings. And even if you could, that's not gonna get you the fucking S rank. The only saving grace about the ranking system here, and it's not even something I can say for certain, it's mostly an assumption, but I'm pretty sure if you die in a level, your score doesn't reset to 0. I'm fairly certain that it doesn't because I died a bunch in some of these levels and would still get the ass. I guess the issue overall that I have with the ranking system though is that I can never tell if I'm doing it right. The game doesn't show your scores you play, so the only time I can get a grasp on how I did was during that final result screen, but, like, speed? What does speed mean? An average of how fast I was in the level, how fast I ran past the goal ring, how much boost I had left when going past the goal ring? I never figured it out. But I think it's the first game so far where I genuinely had no idea when ending any level or boss fight whether or not I would get the S rank. Sometimes I thought I did a terrible run and would get it easy, and other times I thought I was doing things perfectly, epic gamer strat style, but would get an A or B. I don't know. Finally, I got past that really hard part. Eventually, though, I did manage to beat Sonic's story. It only took around, I don't know, 8 hours. Again, I wanted this to be a quick detour, and the best part is, now I have to do it all over again with Blaze. Hooray. Blaze's story shakes things up very slightly. Generally, the levels are the same, but the design has been slightly tweaked to cater to her glide and longer distance she travels from tricks. Along with doing them all in a different order. You know, here you start with a casino level. But surprisingly, well, okay, more like thankfully, I struggled with Sonic's story so much that going through Blaze's was pretty easy. Sure, I have to beat all these levels and face all these bosses again, but at this point, I've played them a million times trying to get the S's Sonic, so just doing it again isn't so bad. Huh. Blaze was over and done within around 3 hours, and one of those was solely on that final boss. But because this game's final boss is a rank, I gotta go through that too, which also meant I had to go through the special stages to get all 7 Chaos Emeralds. I am so glad they didn't also make you do this with Blaze like the Advanced series. The final boss also took me a long time. Despite the cool transformation scene and genuinely great ending between Sonic and Blaze, the fight itself was pretty underwhelming. Did you know the music in this boss fight samples Malcolm X dialogue? There's a fun fact. Basically, you just boost his attacks back at him with Sonic. After enough times, you'll switch to Blaze, in which you aim for his head and shoot fire at him. This repeats 2 times, one final blow is Sonic, and with that, you're as good as dust. See? What do you mean, see? I spent way too long on this. Trying to aim at his head as Sonic was painful. Especially when these rotating orbs are intangible for a bit when spawning. So now I just boost into Eggman's face, get hit, and now I have to readjust myself. If that happens a couple times here, just restart, which means you have to go through the whole process of skipping the fucking cutscenes again, because it takes you back to the menu. But after around 40 minutes, I beat him quickly enough with rings left over, acquired the S rank, and with that, we're finally done with Sonic Rush. Okay, almost done with Sonic Rush. Now I gotta just get the S rank in level 1. This took a while. Genuinely, I don't know why. Maybe I'm dumb, but I did do it. And so, I want you to sit and watch it. No, I'm serious. Look, there's so much empty space here. There's that to keep your attention. Go ahead. Bet you weren't expecting this. Yeah, I'm sure there are quite a few of you out there who haven't even heard of this game, Sonic Rivals. Released for the PSP in 2006, the exact same day as Sonic 06 as a matter of fact, but please, let me put it off for a little while longer. So this was around the time that Sega wanted to make sure there was a new Sonic game on every console as close to launch as possible. Again, this ended up being one of the main contributing factors as to why 06 ended up being the way it was. Sega splitting Sonic Team into two, with the other half starting up secret rings to have something ready for the Wii's launch. So in the meantime, Sonic Rivals was being made by Backbone Entertainment, the guys behind, not much. Seems like they were mainly just contracted by Sega to help port a lot of their games over to the Xbox 360, so this was their only chance to actually make a Sonic game from the ground up. And how'd they do? It's alright. My experience with the Rival series wasn't under the best circumstances. I remember one day doing homework at my great-granny's house as my great-aunt walked in with a bag. She worked as a maid at some nearby hotel and was telling me that while cleaning a room, she noticed that the family had left some stuff there that she... Okay, well, looking back now, I suppose it was stolen, wasn't it? Well, anyways, in the bag there were 2 DSIs, which I kinda overlooked as I already owned one. But what blew me away was an original PSP. I had always wanted one of these. I loved my DS and wouldn't trade that in for the world, but I can't lie, the PSP always seemed so much cooler, like the handheld system for adults. But unfortunately, I was a single system household. One console, one handheld. First world problems. Worst thing happened though. It came with a shit ton of games. Most were racing and junk, which I didn't give a shit about, but one in there that I desperately wanted to play was Crash of the Titans. I'd only ever been able to rent the PS2 version and didn't get very far in. All I owned permanently was the DS port, which was an entirely different game, and so I finally had it all to myself. The fuck is this thing? I could not figure out for the life of me which way this was meant to go into the PSP. The holder too was super confusing. And so, naturally, I figured that I had to tear open the casing and pull the disc out of it. And so I broke each and every game in the hopes that one would work. Not my proudest moment. Whatever, point is, PSP games were now something I could actively look out for in stores. I filled my library with all the classics, SpongeBob the Yellow Avenger, Crash Tag Team Racing, but one day I stumbled upon Sonic Rivals 2. There's a Sonic game on this thing? Looks like you can play as everyone here too, that rocks. And so Rivals 2 ended up being a Christmas gift of mine that year. And after playing and falling in love with it, more on that later, I decided I wanted to give the first one a shot. So I went to the local GameStop, found it in the bargain bin without a cover. It was just a blank white sheet with Sonic Rivals written on it. But whatever, I can finally check out the original. It wasn't as good. It was hard for me to look at that game without thinking about everything I enjoyed more in the sequel. What do you mean there's no battle mode, no voice acting, half the characters? This sucks! Okay, well I wouldn't go that far, I still had fun with it. But as a result, the first Rivals game to me was just way less replayable. So the gimmick of this game is that instead of levels, we have big obstacle courses with a million branching paths. And your goal is to reach the end before your opponent. I mean rival. Sonic, Shadow, Knuckles, and Newcomer Silver all have their own story modes here, but for the most part you go through 6 zones in the exact same order following the same structure. The reason for wanting to hunt down Eggman is a little different between them, but that's it. They're all just racing to see who gets to him first. I wish they could do something like this for a big budget console game. One of my biggest complaints with the series now is that it's gotten into such a formula. Every game has to be about Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, with the others getting minor cameos if lucky. There's like a million characters in this franchise, mix and match that shit. Either way, I know I'm stalling a lot when it comes to discussing the S ranks here, but there's a very simple reason for that. It took me 2 hours. Yeah, by a landslide, Sonic Rivals has taken me the shortest amount of time to beat. And there's one major factor contributing to that. The developer respects your time. So you know how in every Sonic game so far, every character has had their own set of ranks? It's kind of like the Advance series, forcing you to get the Chaos Emerald as every character to unlock the final boss. Like, I did it once, why are you making me do it another 3 times if it's the same exact experience? It's busy work, I tell ya. Well, surprising to me, Sonic Rivals only counts your ranks as one character. Meaning you can get an S rank as Sonic in one stage, and as Silver in the next stage, but they both contribute to the same overall progress. It's not like I have to get all the S ranks as Sonic, Shadow, Knuckles, and Silver. Thank Christ. Although I almost thought for a while that I wouldn't be able to do this one at all. See, I'd gotten to the end of Sonic's story and I needed to go back and get whatever S ranks I missed, but they weren't in the story select, not in the free play. I was looking everywhere and just assumed that, for whatever reason, they never thought to list your S rank history anywhere. And so I decided to look in every single place I could, no matter how stupid, and find them tucked away within the options menu. Why? By the end of Sonic's story, I was only missing 4 S ranks overall. I had a pretty simple time with this one. Sonic Rivals would be an incredibly fun game. The controls, while not perfect, are perfectly manageable. Each stage has a bunch of cool and creative gimmicks which aren't overly complicated. Most of the time you're just timing your X presses. They also absolutely love these little bumpers here, which you can use to either launch straight up or to the right. That's honestly where most of the alternate paths are created, but it's all solid. There is just one thing holding this entire game back: the AI. The other player is a friggin' cheat. First of all, on the most basic level, you can use items to attack them, and in turn they can use items to attack you, or you can simply use your homing attack or push move. But anytime I attacked them, they would just get right back up again immediately. Yet when they attack me, I get stunned for like 5 seconds, which in one of these races can be the difference between winning and losing. The rubber banding is atrocious. They don't even try to hide it. They give you this little map on the bottom that shows you where you and your rival are in relation to the goal, and so you can just watch yourself slowly inch along as they start skyrocketing towards you. But what's more frustrating is that this happens in stages where the game actively punishes you for being in first. Like having to push these blocks to progress. The person in second doesn't have to do this, it's just me. And this takes a bit, and so there's nothing more stressful than slowly doing this while seeing your opponent rapidly approach you way faster than you got through the level. And then, just as an extra fuck you, they more often than not always catch up to you right as you finally open up the way, meaning they can just attack you and run past. Great. Like, look at how quickly he started catching up by the end. How? What is he? Chaos controlling or something? You're better off staying at the top path the entire time, as it tends to be the fastest route, and so you're usually getting the same points from enemies and rings and such. The S rank, therefore, is mostly a result of how fast you get there. Or more accurately, how many times the game screwed you over. The bosses were consistently pathetic though. I S-ranked each of these on my first go. It's a neat idea to have both you and your rival facing off against them at the same time, the winner then being whoever can land 6 hits on the guy, not that the game ever tells you that. But here, it's the opposite issue. The AI is way too easy. Look at this, Silver can't even manage to get onto the second platform. He has no chance. Speaking of, by the end of my playthrough, I quickly got 2 of those S ranks I needed, but the other 2 were a challenge, to say the least. And it's all because of Silver, with his stupid ass hair. What is he? A pothead? It was the Act 2s of both the second and fourth zone. Coincidentally, the 2 zones where Silver is your rival. See, for the most part, every rival is the exact same. There are no character-specific abilities here like Knuckles' Glide or Silver's Telekinesis. Unless you manage to grab the star item, in which your character is given a unique super move catered to them. Sonic has a boost, which is helpful for the time bonus. Knuckles does a grind pound to stun you. Shadow slows you down with chaos control. But Silver gets a power that not only stuns you, but then also messes up your control scheme for like 5 seconds. Up is now left, down is now right, and so on. Maybe I just couldn't get a handle on it, but I also think it's different every time, like now down is up and right is left. And so anytime this happens to you, instead of scrambling to figure out the controls and potentially start going backwards, or god forbid send yourself into a pit or something which wastes even more time, you're better off just completely stopping and waiting for the effect to wear off. Silver is insanely overpowered, and the AI can get the special power 2 to 3 times in a race if they're lucky, but other times, they won't get it at all. So whether or not I get a good enough time for the S rank is entirely up to how this AI picks up items. It took me so long relative to the other stages that I was genuinely contemplating just beating Silver's story so I could play as him instead, and ensure this move won't be made against me. But I think I must have played it like 50 times, which allowed me to memorize the stage to a T. The main thing fucking me up was the beginning, trying to get up here before Silver, making sure the enemy that shoots you wouldn't send me back down, and then getting the timing right on this jump to reach the item that's always a star. But sometimes, and I need to look at the footage to make sure, but I am confident right now in saying that Silver's AI just starts teleporting at this moment sometimes. I'll be way ahead and get past the robot, but then I'll look, and Silver will suddenly already be grinding on the rail. So unless there's just some fucking alternate route that I'm too stupid to see here, that sucks. It makes it impossible to truly get good at your game if the AI is running on a different set of rules. And if anything, it's worse to get good at because the AI will only then try to overcompensate. I have to assume the deadline was tight, probably why a lot of the second acts are also just a slightly harder version of the first towards the end. Looking at you, Carnival Level, the lighting doesn't fool me, but I guess it was just easier to program all the things the AI can do to stay on track, no matter the player's skill level. You know, instead of actually taking the time to make sure the AI is smart with how it plays. I mean, look at this. At the end of the second Junkyard stage, Metal Sonic has just started going backwards. Where are you going? But that one thing really does set the entire game back, because it's what the thing was designed around. Racing an AI. There was no hope in hell in finding a friend who also owned a PSP and a copy of Sonic Rivals. One who also wanted to play Sonic Rivals. Still though, I think overall it's a decent game. I think the heat for them can sometimes be a little bit overblown despite my bitching. Believe you me, I would have been a lot more harsh if the S ranks were an actual challenge to get. If every stage had the difficulty of that one ice level against Silver, then I'd be singing a different tune. But it's a great idea for a Sonic spin-off that I'm really disappointed never managed to leave the PSP. There is no way Sega would ever port these things in this day and age, and so it's fairly likely Rivals will slowly be lost to the sands of time. Which sucks. That's it. Alright, I've put it off for long enough, but it is finally time we take a look at Sonic the Hedgehog. 2006. Guys, I really don't want to play this piece of shit, but my evil doppelganger is forcing me. Hot take, although nowhere near as hot of a take as it once was, I guess. Sonic 06 isn't the worst thing in the world. Maybe it's just because most games today release in a similar state, but for me it's mostly down to the fact that I got it as a gift after watching the Super Sonic cutscene on YouTube and thinking it was going to be the most action-packed epic Sonic adventure ever. And hey, at least through the eyes of a 9-year-old, it kinda was. Yeah, I liked Sonic 06 before the PC remake. What of it? Bros it. Alright, you can see the timestamp. Sonic 06 segment here is much longer than the rest. And it's for one very simple reason that I'll get to later. Overall though, this is definitely the one that took me the longest to beat at a whopping fucking 30 plus hours. Big plus right there. I'm being pretty generous, I don't have an exact number for reasons that I'll get into later. Although to be fair, a good hour or so of that was just trying to get the fucking thing working. Like I said earlier, with the Xbox 360 store shutting down, it was the perfect time to make this video. Only issue is, I no longer have my 360. So I went to the same store I found, saw the video game at, and picked one up. Although the asshole gave me a controller that didn't work. But that's okay, because I can just take the spare controller I have for the Xbox 360 I bought a couple months ago and forgot about. Oh, god damn it. That store didn't have 06 or Unleashed, and with it being too late to go to any other, I thought, well hey, I can just buy them on the Xbox store, right? Easy. I remembered having bought some of the DLC for this game years back and figured I could just re-sign into that account and re-download it. Which worked. After about 30 minutes of trying to log in. I guess with the 360 being 2 generations behind at this point, they've stopped maintaining the website as well, and so for whatever reason it just kept not letting me log in. I had to reset my email and password like 4 times. And even then, when I got it working, connecting the thing to my Wi-Fi was a whole other issue. Turns out the one I got could only get internet with an Ethernet cord, and so after that I was off, surfing the net like nobody's business. Eventually I got onto the store, went to Sonic 06, and it wouldn't let me re-download it. That's right, of course, it's region locked. I thought because I signed into my Ireland account, the store would be in pounds, you know, like the Switchy shop, but nope. It was at this moment I learned that signing into my old account was a mistake. Whatever, I'll just make a new one. Except no, because every time I would try to, the Xbox would either tell me there was some error when logging in, or just wouldn't give me the option to. Great, I'm stuck. I eventually realized I could change my console region to the UK, but that wouldn't work. And so I tried to do the opposite and transfer my UK account to a US one, which just wouldn't happen on my phone no matter how many times I tried. It just kept redirecting me to the Xbox One S side or whatever the fuck the new one's called. And so eventually, I tried it on my computer, and it worked. Then it wouldn't let me buy the game. Something about my UK PayPal being attached to the account and it wouldn't let me add a new payment method. The option was constantly blacked out. And so once again, I had to do it on my computer. And after all that, miraculously, start playing Sonic the Hedgehog. That's when the fun truly begins. Okay, so honestly, guiding through the main story here was pretty mindless. It took me a little bit to get accustomed to the controls again after playing nothing but Project 06 for the past few years, but this and Generations were probably tied for my most played Sonic games when I was younger. I thought 06 was so cool and massive in scope. 06 is definitely one of those games where the idea of getting every S rank seems daunting, given how unwieldy it can be. but once you get used to its many quirks, it gets a lot more manageable. Similarly to heroes, it's become so second nature to me over time that I can't even really point them out unless I see them. Like hitting enemies in a very specific way to avoid their hitbox activating too soon and you getting hit, or Sonic's homing attack sometimes not targeting right off the top of my head. It's the sort of thing that can kill your run, and you have to keep it in mind at all times. Now that's not to say getting the S ranks was easy at all. No, a good few of these took me a ton of tries. But generally, my method of getting them was similar to the other games. Never stop, destroy enemies when they're in your way, and if you get hit and lose your rings, just restart, because in this game, more than any other, those ring bonuses are everything. Like Rush, 06 has a fixed score for every level's rank, 50,000. In bosses or anything else really, that score is then decreased to 30,000. And unless you're in a really poorly balanced level, no single thing is going to help you over another. You need a pretty consistent mix of score, time bonus, and ring bonus in order to get that S. The main thing that messes you up is how much of an endurance test some of these can be. Flame Core, Aquatic Base, especially Kingdom Valley, are all stages that go on forever. And if you die at all, you may as well just go back to the beginning. You don't even want to risk not having the opportunity to get it and having to go through that 15-minute slog over again. The boss fights were also fairly easy to get through overall, but there were a few that stood out as especially annoying. For the life of me, I could not figure out the S rank in Egg Genesis no matter how hard I tried, before remembering this is one of the rare bosses to have 2 weak spots, even if unintentionally. See, when he lowers to the ground, you can bounce attack high enough as Sonic to home in on him and save a ton of time. I assumed at first that this was an oversight from the Silver boss, but I could not get the S otherwise, so maybe it was designed that way, who knows. Iblis Phase 2 is just so slow and boring. It takes like a minute and a half each time to even attempt to hit on him. And whereas in other Sonic levels I could just use the red gem to slow down time and get an insane bonus, here I can't do that because I have to wait forever for his attacks to finish either way. So I mainly just use the purple gem to infinitely jump to his platform early. Even worse, Shadow has to go through this boss fight as well with his own rank to obtain, which was really annoying, but for the most part I had a way easier time with him. Because his gameplay puts a greater emphasis on combat, I don't really think they thought through how much score you'd be getting from enemies here. That's kind of the advantage of giving each stage its own requirements for the S rank, you can kind of cater it specifically towards that one. Again, sometimes you need to do a perfect run of these things, but other times, like in his version of Kingdom Valley, despite the horrible vehicle part, Rouge controlling awfully, and dying, I still got the S. I mean, hey, I'll take it. The Iblis Phase 2 and Mephiles bosses were really frustrating me. I was trying them over and over again all day before taking a break for like a week and getting them both on my first try. Sometimes it really does just take coming back in with a fresh pair of eyes to realize things aren't as hard as they seem to be. Silver wasn't even that bad despite being super slow, and it being way easier to lose rings given so many of his moves require you to actively stop moving as missiles laggily shoot towards you. Again, I've played 06 a gazillion times, so infamous S-rank ruining moments like the ball puzzle and Dusty Desert are things I can do first go. You may think I'm bragging, but I assure you, this is not something to gloat about. The main thing I struggled with for him was the Egg Genesis fight. Like I said, you can only shoot at his bottom weak spot using the stuff around you, enemies that spawn, and the bullets he shoots. But only focus on the bullets, because you need to do this in like 2 rounds, and even then, the S rank's not a given. The hit detection is so shit that it took me forever to realize I could just stand completely still as he shot them to pick up every single one. At that point, it's a game of luck, whether or not the auto aim wants to target his weak spot or one of the searchlights that don't do any damage. Still though, I got through 06 pretty quickly. One very simple final boss later, and that's every S rank in Sonic the Hedgehog. Which shit, I completely forgot. Every stage in Sonic 06 also has a hard mode variant, paired with its own rank to acquire, meaning I have to play every single level over again. Joy. Worst part is, I could accept it if this was like a drastically different way to play the stage, but no. Just take the original, shove a couple more enemies around the place, and there you have it, that's hard mode. For the most part, this was just a case of playing every level over again, aside from a couple standout annoyances like Silver's Aquatic Beast, where the threat of losing my rings was a constant stress. Okay, well whatever, there we have it. 06, out of the way. Oh wait, no shit, fuck. The town missions, oh god, I forgot about those. So, around the hub worlds in 06, you can find human NPCs with little blue ticks over their heads, signifying they have a mission for you to complete. A mission that you also get ranked on, naturally. These were so obnoxious to find. There's a handful that are mandatory for completing the main campaign, you know, it's the very first thing you do with Sonic for some reason, but there are still a ton left over. And finding the fuckers is a whole adventure in and of itself. Again, there are 3, count 'em 3 hub worlds, and while New City and Soliana are fine, the fucking forest is a nightmare to traverse given how open, empty, and maze-like it is. Even worse if you're playing as Silver, whose top speed doesn't go beyond the lazy kid in PE who's trying to get away with jogging as slowly as possible so he doesn't get in trouble. See, they had an ability to make him faster, but didn't have time to program it in. Sonic has the most time missions at 20, and while most are fairly easy to get through, just being a case of attacking enemies in an enclosed area, or jumping through rings, or leading Peely, the beloved dog, to his owner. Standout ones worth mentioning. I like the one where I had to do a race around Ciliana collecting a certain amount of rings, but the guy organizing it's trying to fuck you over by keeping one to himself. And so you have to electro-shock him to get the final one, which pisses him off. And the final shot in the result screen is of Sonic posing at the camera as he argues with his wife in the background as this pleasant acoustic guitar strums along.
That was incredible!
Yeah. The one where you have to chase after the kids has always been a nightmare. I can play this mission for as long as I live, and I'll never be able to remember where they all are. Sonic Man is fun. It's one of the only times this game tries to lift the mood from how depressing and dire the story is. And for some reason they make you do these god-awful math mini-games where you have to do equations or remember number combinations. It sucks. Worst part is the time limits for some of these are tight. And it's not just a case of approaching them again in the hub world to reactivate the mission. Once you complete the mission, they're gone forever. And so now you gotta go all the way back to the menu, go to trial select, go to time missions, and then pick your character, and then you can replay it. What a time waster. I had an overall easier time with Shadow, although I'm sure part of that was due to him having like 5 less missions overall. So many of them involve you running on this highway that I think was meant to be this game's version of Route 20 whatever from Adventure 2. This is where you truly notice how much slower the characters are in this game compared to previous. In the Protect the Professor's Car mission, the game gave me speed shoes, and I had to stop and think to myself, wait, have they ever given me speed shoes before? Was that a thing? Whatever, by far his worst mission is the motorcycle test. Mainly because it has like 5 different segments, each with their own loading screen. And so if you fuck one up or god forbid get to the very end only to not get the S rank, then you gotta do it all over again. It would be fine if it weren't for this part where you have to drive through cones to progress. No, you have to slowly inch along, making sure not to whack him away, but don't be too slow, or else you're not getting the S. Yay! Nailed it. Silver had it the worst when it came to missions, though. These were some of the most tedious pieces of shit I have ever played. Because his gameplay doesn't really revolve around hitting springs or doing homing attack chains, either his missions are super boring, like standing around dropping apples in barrels for 5 minutes, or they're incredibly annoying. So many of these are just a case of being asked to defeat a million robots. Even worse when they make you do it as Amy, the time limit here was incredibly tight. He's also forced to catch the same kid Sonic did, except, you know, he's slow as fuck. And figuring out how this game handles its point system was not something I ever wanted to do with my life. So to summarize my entire experience with most Silver missions, I thought I'd focus on one of them to give you an idea of what I had to go through. So here's a little segment I like to call Silver Mission 10. See, something that's incredibly fun about Sonic 06 is that it's the game that keeps on giving. Anytime you play it, the game will break in some new, interesting way. But as it turns out, you can also learn about some hidden gameplay mechanics. So let's talk about Silver's 10th time mission, Raid Shadow Legends. This is easily one of the most tedious missions in the entire game, because it asks you to approach it in an incredibly obtuse way. As I was playing the town missions in this game, I picked up on how they designed them. Town missions can sometimes be designed in a way to where only score or time will get you the S rank alone, meaning that sometimes they want you to clear the stage as fast as possible, or they want you to get as many points as possible, or, you know, both. And then, there's Mission 10. Mission 10 is one of the most frustrating missions in the game. A scroll through the comments on any video about it will say as such. But why? Well, allow me to explain. See, the mission requires you to defend the townspeople from the Iblis monsters. And so you just go through New City trying to fling boxes at them. So, you know, it's an escort mission. So you think the frustration would come from protecting the citizens, but no. It comes from getting points. I routed my path to be as fast and efficient as possible, kept every ring in the entire area, and still, no S rank could be achieved. And for at least half an hour, I was puzzling over this. I was performing about as optimally as the game allowed. Why would it not give me this stupid gold fucking letter? I'll tell you why. The problem lies in the mechanics. First is with Silver himself. See, the most optimal way to dispatch of enemies as him is to stun them, grab them, then immediately drop them to kill them. If you throw them, he'll do an animation that takes like a second, wasting time. So letting the trigger go the second you grab them is faster and can save you a lot of time as it stacks pretty quickly. The problem is, if you do it like this and skip the step of actually throwing the enemy, any point bonus you get for defeating them is nullified, meaning it is programmed into the game that you have to do this arbitrary step to get your point bonus, even though Silver has them in a chokehold. Letting go to kill them is not enough in the eyes of Sonic Team. Then, there's something that I'm gonna call breakable tech. In Sonic 06, most everything you do or interact with gives you points. Grabbing a capsule gives you points. Grabbing rings gets you points. And the focus on this long-winded tangent, boxes give you points, but there are hidden rules as to how they work. Okay, so boxes give you points, but only in very specific circumstances, such as breaking them directly, or in Silver's case, throwing them. However, if one box breaks another box, or an enemy breaks a box, then you don't get any points. So if you have a big cluster of boxes you're holding and the game's physics engine decides it doesn't like you that day, it will randomly throw an explosion box and get rid of any points you would have obtained from destroying it. This also extends to any other breakable in the game, as each breakable has different point values. For instance, these barricades have 500 points for seemingly no fucking reason, and they're scattered all over this mission, so it is imperative that you break them in a very specific way. In order to obtain the points, you can't just grab a box and throw it at the barricade. You don't get any points for that. You have to actively pick them up with your psychokinesis, drop them, and then you can destroy them. But don't throw them away, because they can go past the invisible wall and just not break, so you have to jump in the air and do that fucking slam attack. Sometimes you will throw a box at an enemy in such a specific way that the game will break and think that the box is hitting the enemy and not you, so you don't get the fucking point. It's nonsense. This game is very good and fine. So, what does this shit have to do with anything? The fact is, breakable tech is baked into this mission exclusively. Meaning, if you want to get an S rank on this mission, and this mission alone, you have to have complete knowledge on how the point system applies to breakable objects. You can get every ring, go as fast as you can, and get every point bonus from the enemy leaders, but it won't be enough. You have to know what boxes to break and how to break them in a very specific way. That means inching along the perimeter, holding a box and then tossing it into a wall, making sure the physics do not screw you over, and then moving on to the next box, in a mission that has like 50 of them. Again, I want to emphasize, this is not an oversight. There's no way it possibly could have been. This is straight up how the developer intended you to play it, by playing some absurd metagame where you have to know how to earn points from smashing boxes properly. Out of all the oddities in 06, I'd say this one takes the cake. Absolute fucking nightmare. Whatever, okay, time missions are done, and we can finally be done with this. Oh, fuck, the DLC are. So instead of deciding to, I don't know, patch the game, Sonic Team spent their time after 06's release creating DLC packs for the thing. Quite a bit, too. All paired with really awkward-looking, poorly translated panels on the title screen. None of them have any spaces between the words, like they're just directly using its internal name. Or they're completely mistranslated, like Team Attack Amigo. Sounds fun. As if the game wasn't long enough, we have a boss rush for each character, each with its own intermissionary gauntlet where you have to defeat a shit ton of enemies. This took me 20 minutes. Team Attack Amigo is just a slog. This 40-minute long level where you switch continuously between Blaze, Teals, and Omega going through different areas from the game, but designed around their abilities, ending with a fight against the Egg Genesis' Omega. Cool in concept, but expecting someone to get an S from this is dreadful. It's just an endurance test. You have to get a score of 150,000 points. Why? But on top of all that, the final bit of DLC for Sonic 06 includes a super hard mode variant for every single stage in the game. So, to get every single S rank in Sonic 06, you need to play all the levels over again. At first, this genuinely surprised me. I played Wave Ocean as Sonic expecting, what, a couple more enemies around the place? But no, the level has been almost completely redesigned. You start at the end and make your way back to the beginning. The Teal segment is more open, they do these fun things with the Lightspeed Dash. I think this is the only time in any Sonic game where the Wheel Chase segment is actually playable and not just a movie. It was hard, but fair, and genuinely something new. Dusty Desert no longer has a lease, and so now the quicksand is unavoidable. That's a cool challenge. The S rank requirement for all these stages have been doubled, going from 50,000 points to 100,000. And so even when using the time gem, I still find myself struggling. Not every stage is as varied, unfortunately, but there's still enough here to warrant the replay. Tropical Resort has Sonic going through Silver's segment. I loved how tense the turtle part was. Kingdom Valley has you lightspeed dashing into lightspeed dashes, along with you having to activate the wind reels right above the water. And Aquatic Base plays way more with the magnet stuff. The ball segment is super tough, and the ending has you going through the last segment backwards. I was not expecting to say this, but I think this set of levels right here has some of the most fun and challenging yet still engaging level design out of the entire Sonic franchise. If only the controls didn't suck. Alright, okay, I'm pumped. Let's do this. What's next? Oh, silver shit. They do not try nearly as hard. Aside from a couple bits of level design being different, they're mostly focused on having you defeat more enemies. And because of how high the score requirement is, it's more tedious than anything to have to replay the stage over and over again, mapping out your exact path to ensure you destroy as many enemies as possible, while still getting a good time bonus. Radical Train and White Acropolis took me forever to figure out, but it was another case of me coming back to it a day later and getting it done first try. Shadow, thankfully, has a way more interesting gimmick, even if I think it wasn't thought through very well. So, in every Shadow level, you are also forced to complete part of the stage as Omega and Rouge. Them even adding in more key-finding segments to stages like White Acropolis. That's cool, the side characters were definitely underutilized in the main game. However, one character here consistently gave me trouble. Rouge. The stupid bat. In any stage she was originally playable in, all 2 of them, it's fine, I can deal. But in what I can only assume was a massive fucking oversight, in every other stage, they forgot to make the walls climbable. How? Meaning once you start doing her pathetic as fuck glide where you drop like a brick, you need to make sure you land on the platform or else you're done. Aquatic Base and Crisis City were awful for this as they're always making you glide above bottomless pits. At least in Crisis City, I still managed to get the S rank after dying, somehow, because the final segment involved Shadow being put in Sonic's Mach Speed section on his motorcycle where there's a bazillion rings and enemies to use to rack up score. However, there was one stage, one level in this pack, that gave me more trouble than any other. Shadow's very hard mode of Kingdom Valley. Okay, so for these hard mode stages, if you've noticed that the footage looks different, good eye. So somewhere, somehow, I think I accidentally deleted the footage for me beating both the hard modes and very hard modes. I still did it, look, there's my achievements. Here's me scrolling through the fucking stage select, but thank God. The one stage I managed to recover my playthrough for was Shadow's Kingdom Valley very hard mode. I could rant about how awful this level is for hours, truly. And so for the sake of brevity, I want to direct you to a video, a cry for help really. Over on my Midnight Mark channel, I've uploaded my entire experience in trying to S-rank this stage. It's 5 hours long, and that was after I struggled so much that I decided to record it. So if you want to get a glimpse into the struggle I faced when trying to get all these S-ranks, that's the best place to go. So go and watch my descent into madness, doing the same things over and over again for hours and hours, trying to get a grasp on every single minuscule element of the stage to finally put this shit behind me. Well, we move on to Sonic Rush Adventure. I think I hit this game. At first I was happy to finally have an excuse to check this one out because I just did not give a shit beforehand. It's weird to consider there being a Sonic game out there that I actively did not care about trying out, but for whatever reason, Rush Adventure was a game that I've consistently over the years picked up, played for 5 minutes, and then put down again, only to try again a couple years later, in which the cycle repeats. Again, it's weird because, S-ranks aside, I love Sonic Rush. A sequel to that sounds like a slam dunk, right? I think it was just a result of how much of a slog that intro is. I mean, hey, the increased production value was appreciated with way more fully animated cutscenes and all, but after that, there's so many text boxes to get through, and as we'll soon see, this ain't just your standard Sonic game, which means a slurry of tutorials for how to traverse this unfamiliar land as Sonic and Tails appear washed up on the beach, as an evil robot pirate and his lackey Johnny try to rule the 7 seas or something, I don't know. That's a fun setup. One I wish I could be more invested in, especially as the plot progresses and the two find out that they've actually been mysteriously transported to Blaze's dimension, and so now it's up to both of them to retrieve the Jewel Scepter and save the day and stuff. I prefer Sonic games with a more linear structure. Tell me where to go next and we're off. However, Rush Adventure contains so much backtracking and downtime in between the actual levels, which is where the other gameplay style comes in. Don't you just want to play a Sonic game where you have to ride around on boats and shit? No? Me neither. So the general structure of Rush Adventure involves starting out at your main hub world where you can play missions with Marine, talk to the locals, or talk to Tails about ships. But to get to the levels, you have to hop onto one of these methods of transportation and map out where you want to travel to, uncovering uncharted islands where the actual stages are, or even running across Johnny who will race you for a Chaos Emerald. Why was this shit such a big trend for the DS? I didn't think I'd be bringing it up again, but Crash of the Titans did this exact same mapping out thing. It's not that fun. The ceiling stuff is fine, honestly. They all control alright, even if there was some trouble in using my mouse as a stylus. They don't last too long, and it does help in making this feel more like a grand adventure. Again, it's not bad. I just don't want to do it. I'm here for the S ranks, just let me play the fucking level. And then when you do get to them, it's just Sonic Rush again. I think some of the locales don't look the best. I hate how lifeless Plant Kingdom is. But in terms of variety, this is right up there with a game like Secret Rings for just how different the environments are this time around. Heavy machinery stages, Sky Babylon, Pirate Island, it's all great. I just wish playing the levels didn't only constitute for around half of the overall adventure. See, when you beat a stage in Sonic Rush Adventure, you get a set of materials based on how well you did, each zone giving you a different kind. Interestingly, there are also places you have to get to on the map that your dinky little jet ski can't go to. And so that's when you gotta learn about the fun crafting mechanic. By approaching Teals in the hub world, he'll let you know that he can build other contraptions for you to get further on the map. Eventually you get a sailboat, this thing, and a submarine, each having their own unique gameplay styles, but the jet ski and this thing are by far the best as they can still allow you to go fast and pretend that you're playing a Sonic game. But the thing is, playing through each stage normally won't give you enough materials to build some of this stuff. Especially not with the constant B's and C's I'm getting in these levels. And so you're forced to then go and replay the stages over again until you have enough. This was a constant pace breaker. Even worse when I finally started getting to Johnny races I just couldn't beat for the life of me, in which I learned that after building all the boats and shit, you can now go to Teals and upgrade them, but not in the order you want. And so I have to cycle through upgrading each thing multiple times, just for the sake of getting a faster jet ski. I was first! How the fuck did he win? And see, initially I didn't think this was a big deal. Again, I did horribly during my first playthrough, and so I was gonna have to replay these stages anyways. Who cares? But as we'll see later, the S ranks for a majority of these stages were so tight, and I ended up needing to play some of them like a dozen times to even get close to it, that there was no real benefit to me replaying it for the materials. It's not like while doing a run for the materials I got an accidental S rank here and there, fuck no. You need to know this level design super precisely to even get a chance. And so I would play it, get the stuff I need, move on to get the next materials, and by the time I've come back to do the S-rank run, I've already forgotten a majority of the level design and I need to rememorize it. Great. This is the main reason why I had such an annoying time getting through Rush Adventure. It felt as if I had to get through the entire game before I could even consider going for the S-ranks, so there wasn't the constant stop and go of spending an hour S-ranking a level, doing dumb boat shit, spending an hour S-ranking the next level, back to dumb boat shit. I'd rather get that all out of the way so I could solely focus on S-ranking the stages one after the other. This meant having to sit with a guide for like 2 hours mapping out where all the Johnny races were, along with all the hidden islands, in which there are 16, each with their own S-rank to get. These weren't as bad as they sound, most are fairly short, it's mostly based on your time. And I did enjoy the nod to Leaf Storm from the original, I played it fucking enough to recognize the level design. But still, all that adds another few hours of playtime to this thing, which I can only assume was the entire motivation behind their inclusion, get those numbers up. Well, okay, anyways, to talk about the actual stages themselves. It was interesting because on every first playthrough I did of one, I consistently thought, that sucked. Not bad, surely, but given how fun and unique all the previous game's levels were, there's nothing really here standing out about these aside from some annoying level gimmicks like the flying thingies in Sky Babylon, or the dolphins in Pirate Island. Both of which drop you if you even get slightly close to an object, in which you quite literally need to restart as your run is over. Similar to the first game, it was mainly tough to get a grasp on what the game expected from me to get the S rank, but after enough playthroughs it became pretty clear that what they really wanted was a good time bonus. That would have the potential to account for a staggering 85,000 points of the required 100,000, with the rest coming from rings and tricks that dropped the speed bonus, thank god. I just decided at a certain point to beat the game normally before caring about the ranks. And I'm thankful for that because it actually allowed me to start appreciating these levels. When thinking about the overall package of Rush Adventure, I barely even remember that this wasn't just a lame boating simulator for the entirety of it. But on their own, these are some incredibly fun levels that actually improve on some of Rush's worst elements. Mainly the bottomless pits, they're still here sure, but not nearly as egregious as its predecessor. I think what I've come to hate most about the Rush series though is that the trick system is mapped to the same button as jump, which on paper is fine because, you know, I'm already in the air, I can't jump again. But the game moves so fast that by the time I register that I've landed on something, I'm already pressing the jump button again to do another trick. This got especially annoying in levels like Plant Kingdom with these vines, because I'd be doing tricks in the air only to latch onto one, and then I immediately jump off again because I wasn't anticipating grabbing onto something that was only on screen for 0.5 milliseconds. And again, at that point, you may as well just restart. It's been a bit, so I'm not too sure on the exact numbers, but I also like how every stage in Rush Adventure is super short. The longest here I think being around 2.5 minutes. That's perfect, especially when asked to do such a clean run. Made it a lot easier for me to just back out of a stage if I knew I wasn't going to get the S rank. And because the levels aren't too long, it never felt like it was that tedious for me to get back to that moment. Although, whose fuck-ass idea was it to not have a restart button? I gotta go back to the menu, go back to stage select, pick my character, and then I can retry. That got so annoying after a while. Also, I'd recommend use Sonic. I used Blaze as soon as I unlocked her for the entire adventure, because of the distance she gets when tricking upwards. However, I think that really fucks with your time bonus at the end, so if you're struggling with these, just pick Sonic. He's harder to manage, but he's faster, so, what are you gonna do? The bosses are what I was most worried about. Again, I love the creativity here. These are some really cool ideas for Sonic fights. A giant robot dinosaur, a pendulum that you have to whack the balls of hard enough to swing back at him, a giant pirate, a character battle between Captain Whiskers and Johnny at the same time. What I enjoy most about them, something I wish more Sonic bosses would adopt, is that they don't take your usual 8 hits. It makes a lot of Sonic fights feel so drawn out and structured. Case in point, the original Rush. But in Adventure, these guys take like 30 hits, but you're allowed to get as many as you're skilled enough to land. Meaning some of these bosses can go by in 3-4 cycles. It added a great sense of intensity to these fights and made the time bonus a lot more manageable. You could always tell where you went wrong. Not to say getting the S rank here was easy. In fact, it would take me like an hour to get it on some of these fights. And like last time, it's down to the rings. There are some fights here where you just need to ensure you keep every single ring in order to win, which is incredibly hard in some cases, like the 3D Temple Run boss where you're only given the chance to collect 18 rings at the very start. You need to end with at least 12 rings for the S rank, and if you get hit in the air at all, you have no chance of getting them back. It was in doing these that I finally started to understand what confused me so much about Rush's ranking system, and it's that it's segmented. See, in pretty much every other game we've looked at so far, the bonus you get for time and rings is constantly fluctuating based on your exact time and ring amount. For example, in 06, if you have 15 rings, then you get a ring bonus of 1500 from what I remember. Then if you get 16 rings, of course you'd get 1600, simples. In Sonic Rush Adventure though, you could get 1000 points for 15 rings, whereas 16 rings will also get you 1000. Same as 17, 18, 19, and then it's only at 20 rings where you get a bonus of 2000. Again, it's segmented. Works the same way for time, meaning you could beat a boss in 1 minute and 31 seconds with 49 rings and get an A rank. But if you try it again and beat it with 50 rings, yet with a time of 1 minute and 59 seconds, you get the S rank, despite the drastically worse time. That 1 ring is not enough to bring it up. It's done. Those aren't specific numbers to any of these bosses, by the way. That was more so just an example of how it works. But it made things feel a lot less fair and a lot more confusing to understand when these unspoken requirements are here. Makes me wish the result screen just showed you what you needed to get in order to obtain the S rank. Like in the Zone 2 boss, I was 1 second off the S rank despite the fact that my rings should have been more than enough to bring it up. But they don't, because having 30 rings in a fight is practically the same thing as having 39 rings, despite there being such a large difference there. I understand wanting to simplify the ranking system, but the way Dimps went about it here is seriously flawed in my opinion. It's stupid. Whatever though, I got all the S ranks easy enough. We also got a final boss to conquer after collecting all the Chaos and Soul Emeralds, where it's randomly revealed that who else but Dr. Eggman along with Eggman Nega was behind the whole thing. And what precedes this could quite possibly be considered the easiest final boss in Sonic history. Just switch to Blaze and constantly shoot at him. 3 rounds of this, and you're done. And I'm done with Sonic Rush Adventure. While being able to focus solely on the levels did allow me to appreciate what this game does, and while I am glad I was finally able to check this off my shrinking list of Sonic games I have yet to play, but I can't really say I'm a fan of this Rush Adventure as a whole. It's no real wonder to me why this one didn't do very well and pretty much killed the handheld Sonic franchise. Which is a shame. I wish we could see more lower budget adventures in between mainline entries. But before we move on, we've got one final unique Sonic handheld game to look at, and it's a sequel to Sonic Rivals. Okay, so again, I was an idiot and decided to play this one before the first Rivals. I don't know what I was thinking. Perhaps I was just doing anything to get away from 06, and Rivals 2 seemed like a pleasant childhood memory to revisit at that moment. Wasn't as pleasant all these years later. Don't get me wrong, Rivals 2 is a massive improvement from the first. The characters control better, you can finally homing attack backwards, that was horrible to deal with in the first, and most importantly, an added step has been added to every zone. Instead of a basic 2 races on a boss, we instead have a single race, a character battle, then another race, and finally the boss, which automatically just makes this game feel much bigger. I mean, if you couldn't already tell from this roster, it's not doubled as each rival is being joined by an ally. Sonic gets Tails naturally, Knuckles gets Rouge, Shadow gets Metal Sonic, and finally Silver gets SBO. Again, it's weird, but I'm all for it. Mix and match these guys. The game has now been upgraded with full voice acting too for every cutscene. It's so cool. You know, actually getting to see these characters interact in a lower stakes situation. As Dr. Eggman plans on using the Chaos Emeralds to open the gates of hell and feed the child alive to this fire demon called the Ifrit, and we find out it was actually Eggman Nega the whole time, but you only find that out in the Shadow and Silver story, I think? Whatever. I also forgot this was the game to introduce Metal Sonic 3.0. Is this the most recent Sonic game to have a new version of Metal Sonic? What happened? They used to do that all the time. Quite possibly the worst aspect of Rivals 2, however, would have to be the complete inverse of the first. Whereas that game respects your time, this game actively wants to waste it. So the structure goes like this for your character. Let's use Sonic as an example. He does the first race, then fights against their rival of that zone. Then for the second race, you play as your secondary character against the other team's secondary character. In Zone 1's case, it's Tails versus Rouge, and then back to Sonic for the boss. So I'm simple enough, and the other character adds a bit of much-needed variety. Sweet. What do you mean there's also a Tails story? Yeah, so each secondary rival also has their own story, where it's completely reversed and you're playing as Tails for the first 2 levels with his shitty flight power-up and all, Sonic for the third, and then Tails for the boss, meaning in total, you have to play all 24 stages in this game 8 times. Each playthrough only takes an hour and a half to be fair, so it's not the end of the world or anything, but still, 8 playthroughs? Even worse, I hadn't played the first Rivals yet to discover that I only needed to S-rank each level once between all the characters, and so I was well into playthrough number 4 before I figured that out. Lucky me. Rivals 2 brings back the card system from the first, with you getting 1 card for every S-rank you get in a stage, represented through the weird secret rings enemies for some reason. What are those? And so this was my mean way of following which S-rank I still needed to get. There's not even a final boss for beating every story, and so for the sake of this video, there's literally no reason to do all this. Honestly, going through this one was a breeze. I can't imagine I'll have too much to say about it. No stage really gave me that much trouble other than the first zone. What is with this trend of the first zone being the hardest S-rank? Best part about having to replay this over and over was getting to hear the City Escape guy come back to make the backing track for this level, which I swear is like a 10-second loop they're just constantly playing over and over again.
Check this out!
The timing here was just so tight. There was this one moment where you had to jump in a barrel, and I learned you can save some time by using Sonic's boost on the way down so you can run through it normally, but even then, it only saved me like 2 seconds. And on top of that, how the fuck is anyone but Sonic supposed to do this? It's similar to the Ice stage in Rivals 1 where I just replayed it over and over again until I got it. The third act was mainly annoying just because of how shitty Tails is. This time, instead of your superpower being tied to an item, it's through a bar that fills up in the bottom corner. Some are fairly useful. Silver again comes to mind. Rouge has bombs that she throws. SBO's fucking sucks, he just turns invisible.
Barely.
Again, Tails sucks. Even worse when you're racing against him is Metal Sonic, because his power is to copy whatever power his rival has, which means I'm not even playing as Tails, and I still gotta deal with the crap move. I didn't even want to bother after a while, and so I just went to level select and did a free play of this stage as Sonic. They for some reason rank you there too, I don't know, I didn't make it. I really enjoyed the battle minigame as a kid, despite how mechanically simple it is in retrospect. Basically, each zone has an arena with a different setup and gimmicks and shit, and you gotta homing attack your rival enough by either going in full force or grabbing items to stun or freeze them. It's basic, but mindless and fun. Some of the later ones, too, were incredibly difficult. I think as a kid, I mainly liked how your character would do their victory pose whenever the last hit happened, and so you could see Sonic stand in midair wagging his finger at the camera as he falls into a pinball machine or lava. I also don't think the homing attack animation was designed to be played in slow-mo like this because their heads are suddenly twisting and turning like the baby in Trainspotting. All I had left to do from there was some of the extra modes. Depending on what was going on in the story, sometimes instead of fighting your opponent, you have a different objective, like seeing who can collect the most rings within a time limit or capture the flag, but it's a chow. Instead of waiting for the moment in each story where this came up, I once again went to free play where you could just pick whatever you wanted to do. And it's not like you have to do this for every zone, just once. There's those two from before, and also King of the Hill, which just involves standing under Omocha for long enough. There were some others here too, but strangely enough, no S rank was tied to it, so fuck me, I guess. Capture the Chow was the only one to give me trouble. I chose the Jungle Zone against Silver and struggled here for like 30 minutes. There's no real strategy with this AI. By the time you go all the way to their side and grab the Chow, they've already gotten yours. And so at that point, it's just a game of who hits the other first to steal back their Chow. Because you can only deposit their Chow in your bank If you still have your original one there, it's stupid. I mean, just look at the footage. I'm just doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And so eventually I thought, well, wait, what if I just choose Capture the Chow in Zone 1? That should be easier. And what do you know, it was. Got it like my second try, hooray. And with that, Sonic Rivals 2 was over and done with. Pretty anticlimactic, not gonna lie. Maybe I would have felt more accomplished from this if I just went and beat all 8 stories, but fuck that. Wait a second. Who turned out the lights? I'm gonna turn into a weremark or some shit, I don't know. Alright, first, let's just get this out of the way. If I ignored it, then it wouldn't be the true S-ranking every Sonic game ever video, would it now? See, Unleashed marks a slight change in the process of getting all the S-ranks for the next few games. As Unleashed, Colors, Generations, and Lost World all have ports that shake up the game enough to where I kinda have to look at it too. They're basically their own things. Quite possibly one of the most infamous stories in relation to the development of Sonic 06, and one of the contributing factors as to why that game ended up the way it did, was a result of a money-hungry Sega wanting to slap Sonic's blue face on everything, with 06 being planned to release on 360, PS3, a PC port which was eventually cancelled, and finally, the Nintendo Wii. Fat fucking chance. They quickly realized they had barely enough time to finish the game, never mind try and optimize this next-gen adventure for the souped-up GameCube over there. But then, we won't have a Sonic game ready to go for the Wii's launch? We can't have that happen. Sonic might die. And so they split the 06 team into two, one continuing work on it while the other half made secret rings. You all know this story. Also, I am so fucking thankful that game has a medal system and not lettered ranks, so I don't have to play it. That's what we in the biz call a loophole, bitches. And because of this, presumably not wanting to repeat the same mistake again, Sega decided that when working on their next mainline Sonic game, they would outsource a Wii port to a different studio. Dimps, as a matter of fact, the same guys behind the Advance and Rush series. Oh yeah, and they dumped it on the PS2 as well, because why not? If Despicable Me can come out on that, then so can Sonic Unleashed. Although I much prefer considering this a Wii game so I can use its more colloquially known name. Sonic Unleashed. Very clever. Funnily enough, this was actually the version of Unleashed I grew up with, albeit very briefly. My French friend brought it home after getting it as a gift in, well, France. And there was something about the box art that just allured me. La Malédiction de Harrison. That's not his name. Dude, isn't it just bizarre to consider that Sonic Heroes and Sonic Unleashed both came out on the same console? That's insane to me. Either way, I played it for about 5 minutes, got confused when the Hedgehog tutorial wanted me to run and jump over this gap. I wasn't the best listener, and I promptly gave it back to him. In which he told me that he gave my copy of LEGO Star Wars to his older cousin, who then broke the fucking disc. I hear the PS2 is an even further downgrade compared to the Wii, controls that were designed around the nunchuck not feeling weird with full analog, and overall, just not being very good. I was considering playing the PS2 version anyway, because who the fuck wants to waggle the Wii remote and nunchuck to fight as the Hedgehog? But thankfully they were gracious enough to allow you to use a GameCube controller instead. Appreciate it. Something that certainly did get on my nerves was the fact that I couldn't skip cutscenes. Whose bright idea was that? Now, I like the story and cutscenes in Unleashed, but I'm gonna have to play the HD version after this. I don't need to see them again. If you're one of the 2 people out there who have never heard of this version before, you're probably wondering, Mark, Sonic Unleashed is like the most graphically intense Sonic game ever. Somehow that's sad. How the hell did they put that thing on a Wii? Well, they didn't. They instead built an entirely different game from the ground up, using the same framework as Sonic Team's version. You experience the exact same story, play both day and night stages, and visit all the same locations except for Empire City. Get fucked, America. Although the mechanics here are surprisingly different, which the game makes sure to teach you, as you're forced through a separate tutorial for every single move you can do. Jump, homing attack, drift, boost, others. Then after you're done, the game pulls up a screen that says, continue playing? Almost as if it's saying, look, that's all we could shove into this thing. If you don't like it, fuck off. The only other major difference between the 2 versions are the hub worlds. They've been completely removed here, and in their place we have... yeah. These suck. I feel like if the choices were either no hub world at all or this, I would have preferred just going from stage to stage, because this is shit. Even worse, at certain points, you're required to talk to certain townsfolk to unlock the Gaia Gates. But you have no idea who it could be, so you just wind up asking everyone. Great. The Gaia Gates are actually the closest we ever get to hub worlds here. You can walk around and select levels or bonus missions. Got a pretty sweet atmospheric track playing in the background too. Honestly, makes me wish the HD version had them. We never really get to explore the Gaia Gates in that one. Wanna hear the greatest information I learned about this game? Information that gave me the biggest sigh of relief out of this whole video so far? Sonic Unleashed has a shit ton of bonus acts for both Sonic and the Werehog, all of which require a certain amount of Sun and Moon medals to unlock, which sounds like a nightmare that would undoubtedly add hours onto my playtime. However, not only are the Sun and Moon medals awarded to you based on how well you performed in the stage, and you know, I'm already going for the S rank, so it's like I'm killing two birds with one stone, compared to the HD version where I'm absolutely dreading the amount of backtracking needed to progress. But also, none of the bonus acts give you a rank. None. They're just for fun. Compared to the HD version, where I'm absolutely dreading just how many extra acts they got. Okay, anyways, I was surprised to see how nice this game looked. Although I suppose that's more so a result of me knowing this is just a low-budget remake of a 360 game. But it all looks pretty good considering that. It's definitely nowhere near as stylized as the HD version. Things are much more realistic looking and the colors are fairly washed out, but I don't know, I appreciate how varied the locations got. Especially compared to how repetitive the other version stages can look after a while. Especially with the Werehog. Chun-Nan has you running through the forest here, Apatos has you running through these large open areas. It almost makes the segmented stages seem more intentional, more on that later. Eggman Land as the Werehog even ends with you reaching the final Gaia Gate he built his amusement park on top of, which was really cool continuity. I don't think you get that in the Xbox version. Sonic's gameplay here is probably at its most different when compared to the other Boost games. He can do everything you'd expect, but interestingly, this is the only case we've ever seen of the boost gauge being cut into pieces. You get a certain amount of rings to fill the bar and you get one boost out of that. It's not like you gotta hold on the button or anything. They also have these action chains where you get rewarded for holding onto rings, drifting, or doing continuous homing attacks by getting an extra boost in your meter. It's really cleverly designed. Now, the level design was bound to take a hit compared to the HD version, but honestly, I find the Sonic levels here really fun. It's a lot less focused on endlessly dashing like a maniac and way more on knowing when to boost. And so you're more so focused on trying to line yourself up perfectly while knowing you'll be safe after slowing down. It creates a pretty fun experience where the challenge is about holding back and preserving your moves, before you're sure you can execute it successfully. There are a bunch of alternate paths here too. I love the water skating segments in Chun-Nan, where instead of running on water and keeping that movement, Sonic starts grinding on the waves. You don't need no lame-ass surfboard. Even cooler when I got to Adabat, I thought I was gonna drown after feeling to make a turn. But instead, he started grinding on the water there too and I gotta correct myself. That's so neat, why hasn't any other Sonic game ever tried that? Even better, the S ranks could not be more simple to achieve. You have this constant timer letting you know how fast you have to beat the stage to get one. Enemies don't matter, neither do rings. It's all about getting through as fast as you can, which makes things a whole lot easier for me. I think Chun-Nan was the only one I really struggled with, but because it was only time-based, it was simple to see where I was going wrong and what routes would get me to the goal faster. Simples. The Werehog is a whole other story. Combat in the GameCube controller is matched to the triggers, weirdly enough. Right trigger is right arm and left trigger is... oh, what was it? You start off with a pretty lame 3-hit combo, but the further you get, the more you start to build up progress and level up, which is thankfully automatically done at the end of each stage. You unlock way more moves, most of which come from the other version, although I never knew what exactly it was that would activate certain ones. The combat was incredibly mindless and never gave me much of a challenge though, so I didn't care. Not even the boss fights. The toughest thing I had to do in one of those was question why the game wasn't showing me the result screen after like 30 seconds and that, okay, there we go. Thankfully, the basic combat wasn't that big of a deal unlike the HD version. The Wii's Werehog levels are much more focused on platforming, which I was happy to see. The controls took a bit of getting used to, mainly understanding that when swinging from something, they don't want you to press the jump button as it kills all your momentum. There are a lot of moments here where you have to just let go and trust that the game will send you in the right direction. I was so confused in the first world, I could not stop getting A ranks the whole way through. Once you finish a stage, you're shown these 3 criterias: rings, time, and something called force. And after a while it became pretty clear that in order to get the S rank, you needed to beat the stage while achieving all 3 of these. Turns out force was this rad stuff you get from enemies, however you can also find it in these capsules hidden throughout stages. When returning to those first few levels at the end, I would quickly find whatever one I was missing, and got an automatic S rank, so it's pretty necessary to keep an eye out for these. They're never too hard to find though. If you've ever played a platformer before, you'll be able to spot them. 2 pathways with rings leading you down one, go the other way first, it's that type of shit. Honestly, I kinda liked this game. It lacks a lot of the spectacle present in the other, but for what it was, I had fun. Quite possibly the biggest reason I could see somebody hating this one is the pacing. See, originally both Sonic and the Werehog were going to have 1 stage each for each continent. Except Missouri, I guess they ran out of time, so we only have a boss there, okay? But because of the hardware limitations, they couldn't find a way to fit these giant continuous Werehog stages in. And so as a result, they split them up into 3 or 4 5 to 6 minute levels. They tried to mitigate the issue by forcing Sonic to play a couple bonus missions after his level, like collecting rings or avoiding pots and shit. But it doesn't hide the fact that you're playing the Werehog for a majority of this thing. Still though, the Werehog wasn't bad, so I honestly didn't mind, but it's hard not to notice that I'm playing 6 Sonic levels, but like 20 Werehog ones. I was surprised to see how different the final boss was here, and by different I mean just copying other games. Instead of going back and forth between fighting as the Gaia Temple Guardian thing and then heading for the Eye as Sonic, you just do one after the other. Quick game of Punch Out as the Guardian, and then 3 rounds of running to him as Sonic. After that, we take on Dark Gaia, in which it became increasingly obvious that this was just a reskin of the final boss from Secret Rings. Whoops. But with that, Sonic Unleashed was out of the way. Didn't want to spend too much time on this one as I'll probably be repeating some points for the Xbox version, but I'm honestly glad I finally had an excuse to play through this version of the game. Otherwise, I probably would have never touched it. Which is a shame, as similar to Rivals, it's unlikely we're ever going to see a port of this game. We can't even get a port of the main version, there's no way we're getting the fucking Wii one. So if the opportunity ever arises, be sure to check this one out. Tick it off your Sonic playlist, because there's definitely a lot to like here. Alright, so if you remember, because of 06, I obviously had to get an Xbox 360. Naturally thinking I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone by doing Unleashed on there too, especially as it meant I could also download the DLC that game has. I'd never played it before, so I was eager to see what all the horror stories I heard was about. However, the Xbox store was so shit to manage, like I said, that I ended up having to purchase each individual DLC pack for my computer, of which there are like fucking 7. I got the first 5 just fine, but after the 6th, it stopped working. I started getting calls and emails from my bank saying they've locked my account due to suspicious activity. I guess constantly sending $2 payments to an ancient website raised some suspicions. I just could not figure out how to get it working again and figured, well hey, the Xbox store doesn't close for another 2 months. This is infuriating the hell out of me. I feel like punching the nearest, Sprite Zero can in my vicinity. So I'll just come back to it another day. Then I was standing around Comic-Con 2 months later and thought, shit, the Xbox store's closing. I tried doing it on my phone really quickly, but that sure as hell wasn't gonna happen, and so I just admitted defeat. I'm one of those people where I'm either gonna do all of it or none of it. I think my videos have made that pretty clear over the years. And so if I don't have all the DLC, then I'm not doing any of it. I eventually caved in and just downloaded Unleashed through on my PC, which was so strange to play. But it was just my luck that all the emulator sites got shut down around the time of me making this video, and so I still could not find the DLC for the life of me. Which sucks because I had already beaten the entirety of Unleashed on my Xbox, thinking if I just played it again on my PC, then I could do the DLC, but nope, I played it all over again for nothing. Wonderful. Even without the DLC, this rivaled 06 just for how long it took me to get through. Unleashed is a pretty meaty game, artificially so, but still. And only some of that time was spent trying to troubleshoot all the issues that came with playing it on PC. This is going to be a problem. Also, I want to be as transparent as possible, and so I have to admit that I did download a mod to make the experience better. That mod being to cut out the battle music, it really did make all the difference. First thing I started to wonder here was how much the upgrades would affect my abilities to get an S rank. See, Unleashed brought back the Adventure 1 progression system, where you could find upgrades for Sonic throughout the hub worlds. Although here they're all moves that he really should have had in his base moveset from the beginning. The Stomp, Lightspeed, Dash, the goddamn Air Boost, why? It's not even like the early levels are designed around the fact that you don't have these abilities yet. There's specific higher pathways that require them. And so I kind of accepted that I wouldn't be able to S-rank most of these first go. Not that it got any easier once I finally had the added moves. Some of these stages felt near impossible to S-rank compared to others. Windmill Isle, Cool Edge, Skyscraper Scamper, all fairly straightforward. But Savannah Citadel, the fucking Adibat one, and Shamar, I don't really remember all the names, were all particularly difficult. In this version of Unleashed, the S ranks for Sonic seem mostly reliant on time and rings, time more so. However, unlike the Wii version, there's nothing telling you what that time is, and so you're left in the dark most of it. Thankfully, the rings were a little easier to manage, especially as some of these stages can get you an upwards of like 700, but you need a ton of these things for it to make any meaningful change to your score. And once you're hit, your ring count is halved, and therefore your bonus along with it. I was always of the belief that Unleashed had the best boost gameplay because of how freeing it felt. The stages aren't as narrow as later games, they expect more from you with tight turns and bottomless pits, and Sonic overall is at his fastest here compared to any other game in the series. But there's one thing holding the gameplay back for me in retrospect, and it's again, the fucking Havoc's physics engine. When making levels this precise, where you're required to execute everything perfectly to a fucking T, then I do not want to see shit like this, where I'm trying to homing attack forward and auto-target onto a lower path. The terrain is so bumpy that sometimes Sonic will just get stuck on things and you'll die. Or how about in Shamar where I had to push this block and it just kept getting fucking stuck. And these levels are like 3 to 5 minutes long. And so when you're already trying to make sure you execute everything as best as you can, remembering each upper path, when to jump, when to slide, when to whatever, then the last thing I want is for the game to bug out and kill me. Sonic's extracts are thankfully much shorter, a majority of them focusing on getting through a simple looping set piece 3 times over with the object placement slightly changing every time. They revolve a lot more around platforming and controlling Sonic in the air, which I'm not a fan of, as Sonic has never felt more heavy than in this game. But because they're so short, it was way more straightforward to memorize patterns and such. Most of this game is just knowing when to jump. The Missouri drifting mission will never not be the bane of my existence though. I've grown to like the drift in Unleashed for how wide the turn is, but this level will always suck no matter how good I get at drifting. I will never be able to gauge when the exact right time to execute it is, never mind successfully doing it like 8 times in a row. And they somehow made it worse in Frontiers. How is that possible? One aspect I fucking hated was having to find these levels in the hub worlds. Each continent has a different amount of extra stages for both Sonic and the Hedgehog, and so you end up having to use a guide just to see if you've missed one. The tutorial was surprisingly hard to S-rank. You need to do this thing fucking perfectly while getting as many rings as you can. The stage is less than a minute long, but it took me like 30 just to get the S. Oh my god, he's Pibby glitching! Surprisingly, I find the Hedgehog much more manageable to S-rank. Every single one of these was gotten on my first try. I feel like the length of most Hedgehog stages in Unleashed has been grossly exaggerated over the years. Unless you're, I don't know, a loser or something, most of these should take you like 10 to 15 minutes. And that's still pretty bad compared to the Sonic stages. It makes the game feel quite unbalanced. And I think they'd be a lot more passable if they focused more on platforming rather than combat. I always felt the stretchy arms were really underutilized. But I don't know, I do find the combat fun, at least when you upgrade them. All you gotta keep in mind for the Hedgehog is that you can be as dogshit as you want throughout the entire stage, avoiding every enemy in sight. You can even die. But right as you get to the end, all you have to do is start taking away a bit of the enemy's health bar until they have this little arrow above their head, and then you just do a QuickTime event to kill them instantly. This QuickTime event gives you an insane bonus, especially if you do it on one of the big guys. And so if you do that like 10 to 15 times at the end of the level, you're golden. Also, sorry, it's just muscle memory for me to pause anytime the QuickTime event comes on screen because they were stupid and didn't hide it on the menu, meaning you can just look at it for as long as you want. I'm so happy they did that. What sucks about Unleashed though is as soon as I got to Chunnan, I had to start looking for medals. Meaning a good chunk of my playtime here was just spent scouring around hub worlds looking for them. It's a real catch-22 where I can't get them in the levels because it would waste time and lessen the chance of getting an S rank. But because of that, and there being way less in the hub worlds, I have to spend more time traveling to every single continent to build up the right amount. Thankfully, the Hedgehog's extra missions are fairly short for the most part, but I honestly think this is where some of the worst levels are. I like how simple Missouri's extra night act was, where you're just tightrope walking above the village. Felt like I was getting to see a new side of the stage that we never got to visit before. The one in Adabat, though, was horrid. These platforms are so tricky to get the timing on as they constantly dip in and out of the water. Even if your fucking toe gets wet, you're dead and you have to look at the Hedgehog's lifeless corpse be risen to the clouds. Even worse when I finally got past it, had to do this atrociously long gauntlet to progress, and then stupidly fell in the water right after because platforming with the Hedgehog is fucking atrocious. I said that already. Still though, I can look past all this because it's typically just a case of doing it once and getting an automatic S. It's not like I really have to try all that hard. I think it was just a mix of having to annoyingly scour the hub worlds for these levels, only to get in them and see that they're not even all that good. Makes me quite glad, actually, that I was unable to find the DLC anywhere. I hear those levels are extremely hard and pretty much double the playtime. Maybe someday I'll find them and make an updated video on Splash Dash going through them, but until then, I can rest easy knowing I don't gotta do that shit. Oh shit, that's right, okay, Eggman Land, the hardest level in Sonic history. It's pretty easy. Yeah, that might be a tad anticlimactic given the reputation this stage has, but honestly, I've never really had much of an issue with it. Other than getting to the end and having my game crash, that was nice. Again, you can die in this level as many times as you want. Most speed sections are filled with extra lives, so there's no chance of ever running out. Maybe it's because as a kid I always tried to beat that fucking hot dog mission where you have to get to the end without dying, and so I'm used to all the death traps they shove over the place. Also, again, you can die as much as you want here, but as long as you start doing that QuickTime attack on the enemies at the end of the level, you're fine. Also, I forgot that you actually do see the Gaia Temple door here like the Wii version, but I don't know, I think it was presented better there. The biggest thing I was dreading was having to S-rank the fucking tornado missions, but surprisingly, I got both of them first try. I always hated how they displayed the QuickTime events here. They can overlap each other. Sometimes when the camera is turning too, they can come in from off-screen. They're a nightmare. But I guess deep down, I just knew that if I fucked up even once, then I could kiss the S-rank goodbye and would have to replay these 6-minute slogfests all over again. And, locked in, as the kids are saying. The final boss didn't even have a rank. That was weird. Okay, you know what fucking pissed me off as a kid? Obviously, the whole point of this game is to give the power back to the Chaos Emeralds to put the world back together. And so every time you do this, a piece of the planet goes back into place. However, once you beat the final boss and go back to the world map, the one on Eggman Land is still out of place. And the game acts like you haven't beaten the final boss yet, it doesn't save. Sonic Frontiers does this too, and I fucking hate it. I don't care if it doesn't make sense why I'd be running around Eggman Land after beating the game. It's a fucking video game, give me the satisfaction of seeing my hard work pay off, dickheads. All that aside, getting through Unleashed was mostly harmless. But those few levels I struggled with, I really struggled with. This will probably be the only time I ever do this in my life. It wasn't all that fun, you know, until I eventually have to check out the DLC. Sure can't wait for that. Sonic Colors, spelt with a U, it's the correct version, was one of the first Sonic games I remember ever beating. On the Wii, I'd never really experienced the DS version aside from a very brief moment at a friend's house. It's weird, despite just how many Sonic games they made for this thing, it was rare to actually meet someone who owned one of them. Again, I loved Sonic, and not even I wanted them badly enough to give up a spot on my Christmas list. I think it's because just in general, Sonic games are a lot harder to pick up and play, unlike, you know, New Super Mario Bros., which everybody and their dog owned. Sonic games can be a lot more infuriating and unfair if you don't know what to expect. A lot more focused on trial and error, which I'm sure turns most average people off. Not me though. I'm a gamer, and gamers don't die, they respawn. Seriously though, these DS Sonic games just never appealed to me as a kid. Mostly because I was very bad at them. I didn't understand how boosting worked, it was moving too fast for me. Rush especially had so many bottomless pits that I couldn't get past Zone 2. They're tough games for a stupid kid, and so I have to imagine that's why the games started to become more and more babyfied from here on out. But before then, we have to look at the send-off to Sonic's adventures on the DS with Sonic Colors. I guess Rush Adventure sold really poorly or something, and so Sega decided it would be easier to unify their console and handheld games. Rush Adventure was actually the last unique Sonic game made exclusively for handheld consoles. Wait, did Rivals? I always forget about Rivals. I imagine it's just easier to have a marketing campaign for one game and just sticking a for Nintendo Wii and DS at the end rather than having to create campaigns for 2 releases every year. Either way, don't let the title confuse you, because for all intents and purposes, Sonic Colors on the DS is basically Rush 3, just with less Bleez and more Wisps. That's not the only difference, however. I was actually pretty surprised to see just how many new moves Sonic's got here, all of them being pulled from his boost games. We've now got a proper homing attack with a reticle and everything. There's a slide, which is used at least 3 times. We've also got a stomp and a wall jump. I'm happy to see these get pulled in, as they offer a lot more gameplay variety in these stages. However, I don't understand why we had to sacrifice the trick system for all this. I guess it's to emphasize collecting white wisps for boost. So much so that you don't even have the boost in the first stage, you have to unlock it. And while I did get used to this change eventually, especially as more wisps got unlocked, it was hard getting used to this after spending so much time on Rush and Rush Adventure. But no, yeah, you don't have access to all your wisps from the get-go, meaning getting an S rank on your first attempt is near impossible. It took me until the final boss fight on Sweet Mountain to get my first one aside from the special stages. Oh yeah, that's something this game has over the console version, special stages. You're given the option of earning them if you finish a level with 50 rings. They're just a clone of the ones from Rush, which in and of itself was a clone of the one from Sonic 2. But they shake it up a tad by having multicolored orbs to collect. You do 3 laps, first is red, next is blue, and then yellow, with your main objective being to try and dodge any color that you're not currently on, as in turn it lessens the amount you can collect on the next lap. Now, I wouldn't even bother bringing these up, but like I said before, you're now ranked on these, I think for the first time in the series' history. But it's honestly no sweat, they're all fairly easy and don't require much effort. The wisps are really what makes Colors DS stand out compared to the previous 2, however, with each stage having at least 2 you can use to access shortcuts. The wisps here are necessary in order to get an S rank, so your best bet is to honestly just go through the game normally until you unlock them all, and then go back to S rank every stage. Saying that though, I somehow managed to S rank all of Aquarium Park on my first try, I don't know how that happened. There are much less wisps here compared to the console version, and because of that, its stages are allowed to be much more focused on catering level design strictly towards them. See, as we're gonna soon see in the Wii game, for the most part they treat wisps as something optional. Many stages are able to be beaten just as Sonic. The DS version, on the other hand, makes most of these levels require wisp usage a few times throughout, especially since it kinda takes away from this giving you the same thrill that Rush and Rush Adventure did. But I don't really mind. The wisps work a lot better in 2D than they do in 3D anyways. We got Laser, Drill, and Rocket, along with 2 wisps exclusive to this version, being Burst and Void. Burst letting you hold on the jump button to skyrocket upwards while insta-killing anything on screen, and Void letting you float around for a while, sucking in objects and enemies, even stuff stuck within walls. They all keep the movement up and never slow you down if you know how to use them. The main one that took a bit of getting used to was Void in Asteroid Coaster. There's all this insta-kill ooze that you have to get dangerously close to, and for some reason they would always just lower into it with no rhyme or reason. I think the worst one here though would have to be Drill. Planet Wisp is almost exclusively designed around it, and was the zone that took me the longest to S-rank, mainly because of its controls. In the Wii version you have full 8-directional movement, but here it's down to 4. You can only go up, down, left, and right. So when they do ask you to travel diagonally against spikes and whatnot, you need to awkwardly switch between 2 directions, making sure not to overshoot it. You're on a time limit too, so the more you fumble around trying to get through a tube or something, the more you increase your chance of Sonic getting buried alive. RIP. The turn is also just way too wide, and made being precise a nightmare. Because of this focus on the Wisps, however, it makes the S-ranks a lot more straightforward to get. Just find the most optimal path, generally the top one, and make sure to stay there while collecting as many rings as possible. And most importantly, using as many Wisps as possible, as you're given a bonus at the end based on how much you used them. Again though, most Wisps are on the upper pathways, and so it's vital to know the layouts of these stages as best you can. That's not to say these were easy to manage, but generally I was able to get most within around 20 minutes worth of retries, which probably equated to like 10 or so playthroughs. The more I think about it actually, the more I think this might be my favorite out of the Rush trilogy. There were way less moments in this game where I felt slighted due to not being able to see what's ahead of me. Even the bosses weren't as much of a challenge. They all basically work the same way, and none of them were anywhere near as long and tedious as previous Rush games. Usually they'll just open their weak spot after attacking, you attack them to get some boost, and the part that took me a second to realize is that you're then meant to boost into them, not only to deal more damage, but to also obtain a Wisp, which you can then use to basically finish them off super quickly, getting an automatic ass. Gone are the days of needing to collect and maintain every single fucking ring in a fight. Now the bosses are actually fun to S-rank. Well, okay, not all of them. See, to get the last Chaos Emerald, you have to go to Gameland, play a single level where you race against a CPU, and then if you get 50 rings by the end, you can access the final special stage, in which completing it unlocks you the final boss against the Nega Mother Wisp. A Wisp that's never even seen in the console version, but given how close the rest of this was to the Wii game, I have to assume it was planned at some point but then scrapped. I was excited to finally play this, but the smile immediately faded as I realized how slow and boring this fight is. Basically, you just charge your attack and hit 2 rocks at the hands, but this takes so long that there's a good chance it's already moved on by that point, and so you gotta wait again. Then you're put into a segment similar to Dark Gaia from Unleashed, where you're dashing towards it and dodging laser attacks. It's also shooting like this purple stuff that slows you down. If you get like 3 stuck to you, then you're not dodging that attack and get sent back a bit. After getting close enough, you can then press the boost button to dash into them, but there's a good chance that when doing this, the reticle will move. You'll attack nothing, and then get sent all the way back to do the entire thing again. This thing is a slog too, despite only having to do it 3 times. And so anytime I fucked up the process more than once, I just restarted. Did not want to risk finally getting to the end of this and not getting the S. But either way, with that, Sonic Colors DS was over and done. Oh wait, oh fucking hell. I completely forgot. Every level has 2 additional acts to play that also have a rank. Oh boy. Most of these drop you on a small part of the stage and ask you to do one of a handful of things. Collect rings, collect wisps, defeat enemies, catch wisps in the right order, and by far the worst of these is to play the act all over again, just with a time limit of like 15 seconds. You needing to break item capsules throughout to gain an additional 5 or 10 seconds here and there. They're pretty short, which was the only saving grace, but there were some of these that I had to spend like 30 minutes on. The fact that the levels are so small means the designers really only had one intended way for you to get the S on most of them, so it's mainly a case of replaying it over and over again, trying to figure out where to shave off a few more milliseconds here and there. The coolest thing about these extra stages was getting to see the cameos by different Sonic characters never seen in the Wii one. Everyone is here: Cream, Cheese, Amy, Rouge, Big, Shadow, Vector, Charmy, Omega, Espio, Knuckles, Cheese. This immediately got infuriating, however, when I realized that you need to go to their conversation every time you want to retry a level. There's no replay option at the end, you're constantly booted back to the hub, and so you have to skip the hello, accept the mission, listen to their good luck message, and then you can retry. Doesn't sound that bad, but it adds up when you're attempting some of these like 20 times. It gets even worse too when I finally S-ranked both of them and saw a new extra mission opening up. Yep, there's actually 3 per zone. Perfect! You know, usually I'd be happy about more content in a video game, but throughout this video it's only ever given me the biggest sense of dread. I'm exaggerating though, most of them weren't bad at all. It was mainly just Planet Wisp and Asteroid Coaster that gave me trouble. Other than that, this was a fun little 4-hour romp through another Sonic game that I'd barely ever played, that probably also will never be ported to future consoles. Which sucks, because this was easily one of the most consistently solid Sonic games out there, even if it only does that by sacrificing a lot of what people like about Sonic by making things a little less fast and a little more traditional. But who cares? It's fun and good, and I liked it, and Sonic Colors, SD, I guess, was recently remastered for modern consoles and PC, and so I figured I would just play Ultimate since I already have it on the Epic Games Store. Yeah, I was one of those guys. This actually timed up perfectly, as a mod recently came out to pretty much remaster the remaster, given the less than ideal state it launched in. However, it was just my luck that when I needed to get it on Google Drive, the download had reached its capacity, meaning I'm stuck with the original. Well hey, at least I got my cool Sonic movie aura and gold shoes. Yeah, just as good. Sonic Colors, I think, was the first Sonic game I ever attempted to get all the S ranks on. Not that I actually succeeded, but I would play this game religiously and have quite the soft spot for it, despite, you know, being by far the least Sonic-y boost game. Focusing a lot more on the new Wisp powers that allow you to tackle certain sections of the level completely differently, like drilling through the ground or blowing through enemies as a laser. It's because of this, and it also being the least 3D Sonic game out there, that it's gotten a bit of a bad rap over the years, but I don't know, I like it. Again, I could never S-rank it as a kid though, I find it so confusing. Sometimes I felt like I could beat a stage as fast as possible, but it would only end up getting me a C or B rank. See, more than any other, Sonic Colors' ranking system puts a major focus on score. Sure, you need to beat it quickly and collect as many rings as possible, but if sacrificing a better time or a higher ring count means spending more time in the stage to rack up your score, then you gotta take it. You'll actually notice on the right side of the screen you get notified anytime you do a special action that gives you points. And by special action, I mean doing anything. Rings give you score, attacking enemies gives you score, doing tricks on ramps, going through rainbow rings, hell, even just staying on a grind rail for long enough or the mere act of quick-stepping gives you score. This makes it sound incredibly easy, right? Just grind back and forth for long enough or keep quick-stepping to build it up and then finish the level, right? Who cares how long it takes you? And that would be true. But eventually, after doing one of these context-sensitive actions for long enough, you'll see the score in the top right refuse to go up any further. The game never tells you any of this, by the way, you're just meant to notice and realize that these abilities have a cap on them, I guess. But the most important thing to consider here are the Wisps. You get a shit ton of points for using them. They really encourage you to try them all out. You can see in the corner here that while using Drill or Spike, I'm just constantly racking up points by not even doing anything. Now this is a problem at first because pretty quickly into your playthrough, and by quickly I mean level 1, you're gonna notice these colored Wisp capsules that you just can't activate. What's going on? And that's because you don't have access to every Wisp from the get-go. With each new planet you go to, you'll get introduced to more and more Wisps until you eventually get all of them. And so now you're able to go back to previous levels and find hidden areas you could never access before. I always find that to be a cool aspect of this game that made the levels super replayable. Despite the more Mario-esque approach to its levels, I definitely think Colors has some great and clever design that gets you thinking. Well, thinking as much as a 3+ game can make you. Again though, none of this is conveyed to you, which is made even worse through the fact that not every Wisp gives you points in the same way, so let's go over them. Laser gives you no points for activating it. You only get points for hitting stuff while using it, but the main thing you want to keep an eye out for here are these giant diamond things, as they give you an insane point bonus. Drill, Spike, Hover, and Frenzy all work the exact same, and then all you gotta do is activate the power in order to start getting points. These are by far the easiest to use. Rocket is one of the weaker Wisps in the game when it comes to getting points, as you only get a short burst of them during the launch, that's it. But Cube is easily the least fun. Not only do you have to stop and place for like 3 seconds every time you want to use its power, but you also don't get any points for using it. You instead get them from collecting these blue rings scattered throughout the sections. So it's more of a case of going back and forth to collect as many as you can before it runs out. Oh yeah, and Colors Ultimate also added this lame new Ghost Wisp that doesn't really do anything all that useful. They had to hastily add awkward new bits of level design into the stages to accommodate for them, but they just again give you points for using it. Eventually, the points you get with one of the Wisps that gives you them continuously will cap, but it takes a long ass time for that to happen. This sounds simple though, right? Just jump in a level, use the Wisps left and right, and then jump out. Easy ass rank. Yeah, mostly. See, Sonic Colors was originally going to have a structure way more in line with the classic Sonic games, 2 acts and a boss. And similarly to Unleashed, it would then have a series of bonus acts you could try out for fun that would reuse parts of the larger stages to create a new challenge. But at some point during development, Sonic Team must have realized that their game would only be like an hour long if they structured it like that, and so instead decided they would force you to play through those other 4 bonus acts, totaling to a whopping 6 acts per zone. There's an argument to be made here about quality over quantity and all, but if I'm being honest, I think this decision were made for the better. These extracts tend to put a much larger focus on basic puzzle solving, asking you to use the wisps in a small portion of the stage lifted from the larger act. I know a lot of folks out there hate most of these levels for how slow they can be, but I don't know, I find it makes the wisps a lot more memorable, rather than if they were exclusively optional like how they usually are in the main acts. I'm also one of those weirdos who doesn't really mind if a Sonic game isn't 100% fast all the time. As long as it's fun, I'm down to climb in colors. It's pretty fun. Getting the S ranks was probably the quickest and easiest experience I've had so far. It's not that they're all easy to get, but once you understand what the game is asking from you, it becomes fairly straightforward, aside from a couple annoyances here and there. In the big racks, you treat it like a regular Sonic game. Get to the goal as quick as you can, collect some rings, defeat some enemies, use wisps when you can, you're golden. Pretty quickly though, that method is going to stop working. You'll finish a stage super fast, but only get a C. You think there must be something wrong, something that you're missing, something you're not considering. Oh yeah, those wisps I haven't unlocked yet. Great. It is vital for a majority of these stages that you optimize the route that gives you the most wisp usage. And because of them all being slowly unlocked over time, it's best just to get through the game as quickly as possible, not worrying about your rank. Because you'll never really know if it's even going to be on the table until you're staring at that big ol' C in the results screen, and get mad at yourself for even trying. Not that that's a problem or anything. Even with those extra acts, colors is only around 2 hours. And most stages here only last around a minute, so replaying them was never much of a hassle. Still though, again, for a lot of the bigger acts, getting through quickly, collecting and keeping a couple hundred rings by the end, and using whatever wisps you can whenever you see them, should be enough to get the S rank. And hey, if not, the results screen also shows you how many points off you were. So if you see it's only around 3,000 or something, then you know all you gotta do next time is try and use another wisp or something. Honestly, I think the act of figuring out how to get the S rank is a better puzzle than any that's actually presented to you within the stages. The smaller acts were definitely where this feeling ramped up though. Again, some of these acts can be beaten in like 20 seconds, but that time bonus is not going to be anywhere near close to getting you an S. Let's use Tropical Resort X6 for example. You can beat this thing within 20 to 30 seconds barely trying, and you'll be nowhere near the S. Even when using the wisps for as long as possible, I still only managed to get the A. I started just collecting Spike and holding onto it for as long as possible, getting every ring I could and killing every enemy, but it was still never enough. But then I remembered, you get 3,000 points for every red star ring you collect. I had only been getting the ones in my general vicinity, as it's impossible to get every single one without backtracking. But eventually I decided to sacrifice my major time bonus and spend the time getting each and every red star ring, including going back at the end for the final one, and it was only then when I got the S rank. This would be a neat challenge if it weren't so seldom done. It's not like you always have to collect every red star ring, nor would I really want that. But there's never any indication as to what you have to do for the S, which is only a problem for stages like this where it's not open, there's no freedom here. You have to beat it this very specific way that we'll never tell you. Get fucked. The only other issue I find with the ranking system they went with this time around is that in certain cases it can be extremely busted and flawed, like they didn't truly consider how exploitable some of these wisps can be. Mainly Drill and Spike, again, these two give you constant points for using it, and they last pretty long too. In a lot of cases, they're also placed in areas where they can respawn, and so instead of playing through the stage normally, I'm just wasting time screwing around, going in circles until I stop getting points. The time bonuses are also so generous in a lot of cases that I'll still end up getting a solid batch of extra points despite how long it took me. And while that's nice, again, it's like an automatic S and all, but, it's not really fun now, is it? Definitely could have taken a bit more balancing, but at the same time, after these nightmares, I'll take an easy one, fuck it. The boss fights were also a joke. So many of them go by in a couple seconds. The only thing you gotta consider is that in the Sweet Mountain and Aquarium Park fights, there are hidden drill wisps you can find in the introductory areas that are required in order to get an S, but you should have no trouble in finding them. Asteroid Coaster had the hardest boss to S rank, however, despite being a mere clone of the Starlight Carnival fight. The S rank is super tight to get, and just like the other worst stages to get it on, it's only because they expect you to beat it in this very specific way that they'll never tell you. Every now and then after hitting him he drops a Rocket Wisp, which you need to use twice on the boss, while keeping all your rings, and quick-stepping as much as possible to get the extra points. However, the game never tells you that you can only get the Rocket Wisp on the first go if you attack the lower area right here, which is really finicky to lock onto, by the way. Then on the second attack, you have to make sure you either hit the searchlights or the side pieces. Attacking the middle gets you nothing. Also, you can hit the middle part of him more than once to do damage, but only the first attack gets you any points. And so you need to make sure the homing reticle doesn't randomly decide to target there last minute, or else you're not going to get enough for the S. You need to do all this in the exact order they want you to, or else you'll screw up the timing and not even get the chance to get 2 Rocket Wisps. Every time I go back to S-rank this game and get to this boss, I think, I feel like I hit this boss, but I can't remember why. And then one YouTube tutorial later, it all comes back to me. Either way, 44 S-ranks later and Sonic Colors is over and done with. Don't have much to say about this one, honestly. It was kind of a blip compared to everything else. I did this a bunch on the Wii and back when Ultimate released, so it was mainly a case of remembering which stages had specific requirements and which I could kind of wing it on. From here, though, the Sonic series started moving further and further away from the ultra hard to achieve S-ranks. Felt like they were only really including it for the sake of sticking to tradition. So I have a feeling that we're gonna have a fairly smooth ride from here on out. Not looking forward to you, though. You know, sometimes I forget this game even came out in the 3DS. That's right, here we have Sonic Generations for handhelds. The game designed to celebrate the Hedgehog's 20th anniversary with you playing as both modern and classic Sonic traveling through iconic locations. I recall during interviews for the game, Takashi Iizuka was quoted claiming that the handheld version of Generations would celebrate Sonic's handheld history. Think the Game Gear titles or Game Boy Advance. But no, the only real stages here directly referencing anything handheld related are the final 2, Water Palace and Tropical Resort, and even then, Tropical Resort is kind of pushing it. I played this at a friend's house once and thought it was so cool that aside from Green Hill Zone, all the levels were different compared to the console counterpart. Instead of Chemical Plant, we have Casino Night. Mushroom Hill instead of Sky Sanctuary. Emerald Coast and Radical Highway were also really cool picks. I thought it was so cool that I eventually picked it up after finding it at a car boot sale for cheap, and I played the shit out of this. This is one of the few Sonic games out there that I actually tried and succeeded to S-rank as a kid. Sure, I was able to recognize that it didn't even hold a candle to the HD version, but at the same time, I didn't care. Generations on 3DS is incredibly simple and feels quite unfinished in a lot of areas, especially with it having 3 levels from the Genesis era but only 2 from the Adventure and Modern ones. But it's still a fun time, and I think it gets a bit of a bad rap. The classic stages are by far the worst though. It's extremely apparent where the corners they cut were. Which sucks because I actually think classic Sonic controls better here than in the console version. It's a lot closer to how he was in the classics anyway. Although I guess that was pretty necessary when the first 3 zones are directly ripped from them. Something the console version did was actually, you know, adapt every stage. They took the most iconic set pieces and tried to see how they could remix it into a new level. It was familiar, but a different experience overall. On the other hand, we have the 3DS version, where every classic stage is a 1-to-1 rip from the original game. Green Hill, Casino Night, and Mushroom Hill are all copied to a T. They're almost too exact, because now you have moments like the end of Mushroom Hill where you reach a checkpoint, only for the level to immediately end. I was wondering why the hell they did this, only to remember that in the original Sonic & Knuckles, this is where you'd be brought into the boss fight. Why not just remove it then? Still though, I take these 3 zones over what they did during the Adventure era, which easily gets it the worst. Instead of, again, trying to do something new, we instead see them trying their best to copy the original stage as close as they can, just restricted within a 2D plane. In some cases, this is kind of cool, sort of like you're able to follow along with the original act. Everything is in reference to that one. But in cases like Radical Highway, it results in all these moments where you're just running in straight lines, not doing anything engaging. Obviously, because in the original Radical Highway, you could, like, grind up the bridge or float around on these. Well, there's not even anything there, actually. Just because they did it there doesn't mean you have to replicate it so closely here. Not everything's gonna translate well. I actually think Classic Radical Highway might be one of the most poorly designed levels in all of Classic Sonic. It is abysmal. And if you're wondering how they even managed to copy the level design so directly since Sonic has a homing attack in those games, well, you'd be surprised to find out that after beating the first boss in the game, Classic Sonic is given the homing attack. What's the fucking point then? You could unlock the homing attack for Classic Sonic in the console generations too, but at the very least that required you to collect every red star ring. It's not just given to you after the Death Egg robot. It's so lazy and way worse than Moderns, and so now for the rest of the game you're pretty much just playing as Sonic, and an infinitely worse Sonic. Perfect. Thankfully, getting the S ranks was not as much of a problem. The biggest one I struggled with here was probably Radical Highway, but that was more so because the entire level just revolves around remembering when to jump. The coolest one out of the bunch here was Tropical Resort though, which even then I think is a lame choice. The other version of Generations has this problem too, where they're ending on some random colors level. It's so anticlimactic. I really think Generations needed time for one final stage. Maybe an original one that combines elements from every single level you've played so far, like the timeline is collapsing or something, and all the Sonic games are merging into one. Anyways, in this level you're once again given the Burst Wisp. It was fun to use again, that's about it. Modern, on the other hand, is just strange, because obviously they couldn't make a 3D controlling Sonic game for the DS. Well, not yet anyways. And so instead we have this weird mashup of elements from the Boost games mixed with Rush. They even brought back that system from the first 2 Rush games where when your boost gauge is full you gotta use it for a while before it starts depleting on you. They try their best to make it seem as 3D as possible, usually by shifting the camera to allow you to just barely see what's in front of you, which is appreciated, along with certain set pieces that send you down an automated pathway in an attempt to make you forget about your thoughts of wishing you'd got this on 360 instead. His levels, though, only took a couple tries at most to get the S rank. The main thing it's based around in this game is time, so as long as you beat it fast enough, you should be good. The only one that gave me trouble, ironically, was his version of Tropical Resort, and only because I'd constantly get on the top pathway, boost off this reel, which then sends me directly into a bottomless pit, meaning I need to restart. Even better is, this is the end of the level, wonderful. Once again, we're ranked on the special stages, take a guess what they're based off. That's right, Sonic Heroes, which are based off the ones from Sonic 2. Unironically, I think these are some of the best special stages in Sonic history. Makes me wish the console version had them too. The Heroes ones were always criticized for how awfully they controlled, and so here it's been streamlined, so you only need to worry about pressing left and right. They're fairly easy, which I guess is a complaint, but at this point, I was happy as it meant I could get them over with quicker. This game also includes confrontations with Metal Sonic, Shadow, and Silver like the other. However, here instead of fights, they're actually races, very akin to the ones present in Gameland on Colors DS, except without the items. These are by far what took me the longest to beat. The rubber banding here is insane. I'd like to think it was an homage to Rivals. Like the regular stages, they're mostly just reliant on you knowing when the right time to jump is for an upper pathway. Metal Sonic isn't too bad. Shadow took ages to figure out the right route for. You're mainly just supposed to save time by jumping over these large dips in the road right here. But Silver was easily the toughest. He can teleport, meaning it's barely even a race. He will always catch up to you. And so it's mostly down to that last stretch of road at the end, to slide into him and hope he doesn't teleport back in time. And beating them was one thing, but getting the S rank was another. Again, it's mostly just based around time. The Silver one, for example, requires you to beat the stage in under a minute, and so I spent ages trying to figure out where I could shave off those precious seconds. I ended up beating it with like fucking 20 milliseconds left to go, great. The strategy though was actually pretty clever. I was surprised this much thought went into it. But basically during this one segment where he's on the top path and you're on the bottom, they want you to hold back and not boost. Just keep collecting the rings until it fills the gauge entirely, and then use that infinite boost you get to zip past them. The main boss fights didn't involve as much thought though. Big Arms is pretty one-to-one with his fight from the original, just with an even epicer remix. Seriously, just listen to this. I was incredibly annoyed though to find out why I was doing this as fast as physically possible, yet still not getting the S rank, and it's because you're meant to know that there's a very brief window at the start of the fight where you can jump and attack him, great. BioLizard was cool, even though it doesn't make much sense since Sonic doesn't actually fight him in Adventure 2, but whatever, it was a fun rendition. And Egg Emperor was an odd choice for a modern era fight considering, you know, he doesn't come from that era, but it was okay. I like that it's a boss that can go incredibly quick if you know what you're doing. Like the original though, we have a final boss against the Time Eater, you having to use both classic and modern Sonic at the same time to defeat him. And as a first for this game, it actually manages to be better than its HD counterpart. That boss fight sucks, you do nothing but boost into it, yet here we actually have different phases with stuff you'd expect from a final Sonic fight. The first sees you needing to dodge a series of attacks as classic, while the second has you boosting towards him in 3D, like a better version of the Colors DS boss. The main thing that gave me trouble when going for the S was this move right here. It was so annoying. I could never get the timing right on when you had to dodge his hands. It felt like it was constantly changing. And if you mess this up like 2 or 3 times, then you may as well restart. But with that, Generations for 3DS was over. I still have quite the soft spot for this game, I don't know. Wasn't that bad of an experience S rank in this. Sure, it isn't the best thing out there, but like most of these other Sonic handheld games, I think it's worth experiencing at least once. I don't know why Sega can't just chuck this into Sonic X Shadow Generations as a bonus. In the original Generations, you could buy a controller that allowed you to play the original Sonic 1. Just do the same thing but with the 3DS port. Archiving games like this can only ever be a good thing. And it's not like they do anything with the bottom screen in this game, so you can't even argue it's because of the DS. In retrospect, you know, I think beginning these with the handheld versions and then doing the consoles after that was a strange choice as we now move on to HD generations. I think I just like the idea of getting the lesser version out of the way first, but oh, you know, whatever, it's already done, just let's move on. This game is basically like a victory lap. Easily the most basic and straightforward experience I've had in this video so far, and I'm positive anyone who's ever played this before can explain why. This is the console version of Generations. I vividly recall this being the Sonic game to convince me that I should be an active fan of this franchise. So it's to blame. No, really though, I remember watching ads for Colors and being excited for it, but one day while I was sitting watching The Simpsons with my dad, this played.
Double the attitude! Double the action! Sonic! And Sonic! Sonic Generations! Sponsors of The Simpsons.
Huh? There's 2 Sonics now? I was ecstatic. This game looked amazing. It's what taught me the internet could be used for more than just YouTube and Googling images of the Teals doll until I got scared and closed the tab. I would go to the Sonic website all the time and watch their overviews for every stage that'll be in it. Generations really was the most genius advertising device, because once those credits rolled and showed the original footage from the games each level was based off, it just made me want to go and play them all. Especially this one, I can't wait to try that out. This game is genuinely fantastic. Sometimes the Sonic fanbase goes through these phases where suddenly the most hated games are actually underrated masterpieces, and the actual good games are overrated and not as good as people say, but going back to Generations after a couple years not playing it immediately reminded me that I seriously think this is the most polished and fun Sonic game ever. Don't know what happened here. The modern levels are insanely exhilarating, with a million alternate pathways, some of which took me years of playing the game to even find. There's always something new to appreciate when going through it. And while the graphics aren't as impressive as Unleashed or anything, it's still super colorful and crisp. The art direction here is stellar. And the classic stages, while controlling a little strange and not being very accurate to the Genesis games, I think are still extremely underrated. Him controlling differently doesn't equate to him controlling bad, you know? And the spin dash is so fun to use and abuse, it's like the one from Adventure. Not to mention the level design, set pieces, and especially the camera in these classic levels are masterful. Now, the reason the S ranks are so easy to obtain in this game comes down to one simple factor. The only real requirement you have to keep in mind is, don't die. That's it, really. As long as you get through each level at a moderately quick pace without dying, you're golden. Generations is infamous for its easy to obtain S ranks. And while I do appreciate it in this video's context, as it meant I could get in and out of this thing in an afternoon, I can't help but feel like them being harder to get and therefore forcing people to learn the ins and outs of these stages and how Sonic controls would only make folks appreciate the game even more. It ain't perfect, there are certainly moments here and there that I'll never not find buggy. For example, this part at the start of Modern Chemical Plant, which is super cool in concept because if you get to the upper level here, you can risk an air boost into this dash ring and then lightspeed dash to further into the stage, which feels really satisfying to pull off. But that only ends up happening like 1% of the time I attempt it, because half the time, Sonic's moving way too fast for the lightspeed dash to even register. But stuff like that is so few and far between. And don't get me wrong, the rank does factor in rings in time, but they're so generous with how long they expect you to beat a stage that you'll never even notice it. Score has also been basically completely removed, meaning doing tricks and defeating enemies has pretty much become superfluous. It's all in aid of giving you more boost, which I suppose does help you get a better time and therefore more chance of an S rank, but that would only really work if the times required were tighter. Like, look at this. Classic Rooftop Run ends with this moment where you need to grab onto the clock handle and use it to jump into the center, where you can then spin dash to make it shoot out and crush this airship. Which is fucking cool, by the way. But I jumped the gun and missed the center, and then had to sit there for ages and wait for the clock hand to come all the way around again for another attempt. S rank. A byproduct of this is that the rank no longer feels rewarding. It's no longer a show of skill, it's something your 2-year-old cousin can get. And he's stupid. Same goes with the boss fights. Once again, we got 3 rival ones and 3 regular bosses. And there's not much to even say about it. There's no added challenge or skill here in trying to get the S. Something I'd completely forgotten until very late into my playthrough was that every boss in this game actually has a hard mode variant, and I assumed that's where all the challenges gotta be. Nope. Half the time, I could barely even make out the differences. Metal Sonic is a little more intense with his last move, I guess. Death Egg Robot takes a couple more hits for his first phase. With Shadow, you have to collect 3 orbs instead of 2 to get your power up. Perfect Chaos has the biggest change in that you're sent off to an entirely new section of the level for the 3rd hit on him, but ironically, I think this segment is more easy and straightforward compared to the normal one. Silver sends out an extra box to crush you while running from the big ball of debris. Egg Dragoon, once again, takes a couple more hits. And finally, the Time Eater might be a tad faster, but honestly, I couldn't really tell. This fight sucks either way. So, that's it, right? Straight into the point. Wonderful, onto this train wreck. Well, not exactly. See, Sonic Generations has one more game mode apart from the main levels and boss fights, a mode that most people out there have barely bothered playing. And that is the missions. To extend playtime in the game, once you finish each era, you have to collect 3 keys to access the boss. These are unlocked through playing the missions scattered above the regular levels. And there are a ton of these, 5 for every level for Classic and Modern Sonic, totaling to 45 each and 90 altogether. To unlock the key, the game only asks you to play one of these missions, meaning by the end you will only have played a tenth of what they have to offer here. And because you can pick them in any order you want, and from various Let's Plays I've seen of the game, it appears that most people get to Sky Sanctuary, play the Modern Knuckles treasure hunting mission because it's closest, see it sucks, and then write all of them off as a result. But as someone who frequently goes out of his way to beat all of these, I have to say, most of them are great. They're usually focusing on a single gimmick, which I think some find cheaper or lame, but I personally think it's really smart. Most Sonic games aren't like traditional platformers where they establish a gimmick in a stage, and they continue expanding upon that throughout before moving on to the next. Usually they're a lot more focused on set pieces, and oftentimes gimmicks appear once, maybe 2 times, before being thrown out for something else. Think Modern Seaside Hill, where you have segments like driving in the car which only appears for a brief moment before moving on to the next gimmick. A good Sonic stage, in my opinion, should feel like a playground of ideas, all of which offer something fun and new to do with Sonic's moveset. Because of that, it results in there being a lot of wasted assets in these games, features that pop up once and never again. In turn, I think having smaller missions that focus on a single one of these is a brilliant idea. Allows you to reuse assets and expand more on gimmicks without slowing down the pace of the regular levels. And the only factor for an S rank in these missions is the time, which you can constantly be reminded of in the top right corner. And because of that, I find a majority of them to be a fun and quick challenge. Strangely enough, I find myself really enjoying the classic Sonic ones more often than not. Green Hill has cool ideas like making all the badniks giant. Chemical Plant has one where you can summon Teals to help you fly around like in Sonic 3. And they get a ton of mileage out of the elemental shields here, which aren't even seen in the regular stages. Here we have the first time in the entire series where they were able to create level design and challenge specifically around using their abilities. Actually, it's weird, I find the classic ones get worse over time compared to the modern ones, which I think get better. The worst easily are the ones that involve Sonic's friends, probably didn't help the growing complaints towards them at the time. Seaside Hill has this horrible classic mission with Espio where you have to use them to grapple these things and swing yourself. I could just never figure out the controls at this one, it's horrid. This one in classic Rooftop Run always screws me up despite seeming fairly straightforward, where you have to grab onto these balloons. And it's only the last segment where these guys are shooting at you, his jump is so delayed and the time is so tight that I could never manage to dodge them. Something I really appreciate about these missions is that they play around a lot with the lighting, making certain ones feel visually distinct from something as simple as showing Green Hill at sunset or Speed Highway during the daytime. Planet Wisp has this gorgeous one where it's got this cool purple sky. Makes me wish this was an option you could toggle through when playing the regular levels as well. Moderns are a lot more straightforward, typically just quick boosting challenges. Rooftop Run has this incredibly fun one where you're playing through a section of the level in the board from City Escape. And that's for the better, honestly, is when they stray away from the boosting, you really get a feel for how awfully Sonic controls when not moving at high speeds. This one in Crisis City is atrocious where you're just hitting switches. The Vector one where you're hitting music notes back at him is lame and takes way too long. Speed Highway has another terrible SPO mission, get fucked I guess. The aforementioned Sky Sanctuary Knuckles one, these are the ones people like to focus on when shitting on these missions, but again, I believe them to be few and far between. For every shitty mission here, there's another 10 that I think are super fun. The ones to consistently bother me were the doppelganger races, which basically means playing the stage all over again, but under what's essentially a time limit. But if you're going for the S rank, then you're already trying to be fast, so what's the difference? But the stages are fun, so sure, I'll play it again, who cares? Overall, Generations takes around 2 hours to beat, with these missions adding on an extra 3 or so, it depends how bad at them you are. But with that, we move on to what I guess we can now definitively call Sonic's second Dark Age, which all started with their next release, Sonic Lost World. So I changed my mind and I'm starting with the console version this time around for reasons you'll see. But after Generations blew my 9-year-old mind, I was on board. What's next for Sonic? It's kind of funny, honestly, how time would seemingly move so slowly as a kid. I recall sitting in school with the only other kid who liked Sonic predicting when the next game would come out, and I was genuinely worried that Sega would stop making them after Generations. Generations seemed so concrete to me, and the ending where Eggman jokes about going back and getting his teaching degree, while written as nothing more than a stupid joke, genuinely made me think that Sonic was over. This is it. Then we got the announcement. Sonic Lost World will be coming out for Wii U at the end of 2013. Hooray! Guess I gotta get a Wii U. It was my sole reason for getting the console. I didn't give a shit about Nintendo Land or Mario 3D World. I got a different world to explore. A Lost World. I was so confused when the game came out to pretty mixed reviews. What do you mean Sonic games can be bad? It was a pretty depressing Christmas that year. My granddad had died like 2 weeks before, and so I distinctly remember just sitting in my living room in silence playing through Sonic Lost World as everyone sat around pretty depressed. And so maybe that gave me a closer connection to the game or something, but either way, I loved it at the time. Don't have as strong of an opinion of it anymore, especially after it eventually got released on Steam and I got to revisit it and see its more glaring issues. But ultimately, just suffers from a lack of focus. This newfangled parkour mechanic sounds cool, until you play the game and find out that it's almost never required to progress. This kick attack seems like a neat way to give more depth to Sonic's offensive abilities, until you get annoyed at the game never conveying what enemies you need to do this on. Then there are all the levels that are trying to completely switch up the gameplay, like endlessly floating through the clouds or an auto runner. It ain't a bad game, not even close. It's incredibly polished, the art style, while generic, is super colorful and pleasant to look at, but it just wasn't a smart idea, not by a long shot. If you had asked me to include Sonic Lost World in this video 5 years ago, I would have wondered why. Sonic Lost World doesn't have a ranking system. You beat the level, get your points, but it's not like it goes towards anything. And that's when, one day, I was playing through and decided instead of doing a regular run, I would try and do time attack. I never liked being timed in video games. Ironic that Sonic is my favorite franchise considering that's just about all of his games. But it always put a certain level of pressure on me. Like I couldn't properly explore the levels without feeling like there's something pushing me onwards, even if entirely artificially. But at this point I'd played the game over and over again countless times, got all the red rings, and was growing tired of handpicking the few entirely good stages in the thing. And so I thought, why not? Oh, you're ranked. Sweet. I'm telling you, the ranking system just adds so much replayability to Sonic games. It's pretty much a necessity, because with this one bit of knowledge, I went out of my way to then go through every single level again to try and get the ass. Then I quit on Silent Force because the 2D levels in this game are really bad. But today I gotta return to this endeavor and get all 28 S ranks in Sonic Lost World. Something interesting to consider about this game's ranking system is that despite them keeping your score, the rank is entirely time-based. I appreciate them giving you what said time is in the top right so you don't have to go all the way to the end to see if you got it. So perfect, just one thing to focus on. Speed. Sounds simple enough. Until I remembered that I can only attempt to play time attack after beating the stage once, which means I have to go through the entire game once already in order to even attempt the S ranks. Wasn't the biggest deal in the world. This is in the category of Sonic games where I've played it so much that I can overlook and avoid the bullshit, but it certainly added another 3 or 4 hours to this playthrough. The main thing you have to grow accustomed to in order to S-rank these levels is the spin dash. That's right, the boost is gone, and what we have in its place is, well, pretty much just the boost with extra steps. The game never tells you how to use the spin dash, by the way, but it makes it so much more fun to play. So, you gotta hold down the spin dash button and then continuously press jump to rev it up. This ends up determining how fast your spin dash is gonna go throughout its duration, so keep that in mind. You know, if you don't have to travel very far, or if you're doing it close to a ledge and don't think you'll have enough time to react, then just don't rev it up at all and you'll still be able to spin dash pretty fast. Saves time too. Anyways, from here you'll probably be disappointed to see the spin dash doesn't take you very far, and that's because the game never informs you that you're meant to press the spin dash button again, which makes it last longer. You also get what's pretty much a predecessor to the drop dash here, where you can carry the spin dash forward after landing a jump, in which it'll basically reset the entire thing. It's pretty exhilarating to use once you get the hang of it, and can create a really fun sense of flow never felt by just using Sonic's slow-ass run. Okay, what the fuck happened there? Something I love doing in Lost World is spin dashing off a ledge, and then jumping on the way down to cross some serious distance. It's really fun to use and abuse. You can even bounce into a spin dash, which saves even more time on your descent and makes you feel super cool. Getting S ranks in these levels also gave me a much greater appreciation for the parkour system and the fact that it isn't directly forced upon you. It means there were times where I thought to think outside of the box and then was rewarded for it. Like in Desert Ruins Zone 2, where instead of slowly waiting on these red platforms to take me higher, I could instead run up the wall and save about 5 seconds. The only real detriment to getting S ranks in this game is the fact that by Zone 2, these levels can start lasting at least 4 minutes. So if you get to the end and fuck up, then that's a lot of stage to have to go through again. But honestly, I never really had any major issues aside from a couple stages here and there. The snowball level in Frozen Factory is infamous for how poorly it controls, and I imagine getting through on a time limit. This includes that terrible Xena boss at the end where it's basically a game of chance. I ended up playing this one for like 30 minutes trying to get the ass. It was just always acting differently. This is an example of S ranks being bad in certain Sonic games, where it feels completely out of the player's control as to whether or not they get it. Like, why did I clip through the reel there? Silent Force Zone 2 is already one of the least interesting levels in the game, with this terrible gimmick where you have to hide from the boss's searchlight or else it's an instant kill. Now, when you need to factor in beating it fast too, it becomes a game of replaying the level over and over again and trying to see which hiding spots you can avoid and race to the next one instead. I also fucking hate that once you defeat the boss, they have a couple seconds of getting up and saying some quip where the timer is still going up. Look at this shit, I was off the ass by like 80 milliseconds, at that point just give it to me. But then you have other levels like Sky Road Zone 2, a lot of Zone 2s in here, which is tough for sure, but in a way that feels fair. This is a perfect speedrunning level and really shows how versatile a spin dash is to use, especially at different speeds. This is in direct contrast to the Snow one, where every time I died I felt like it was my fault. Okay, most of the time I died. But really, as a whole, Sonic Lost World was pretty fun to get through, even if I had to do it twice. I can't really pinpoint many moments I struggled with other than those. In fact, there were a lot of stages in here I was dreading due to memories of attempting them for hours back in 2015 when it was put on Steam, but then I'd try them here and get it first go. Gave me a newfound appreciation for the game, as a matter of fact. There's a lot to like about Lost World's controls that I honestly enjoy more than Frontiers now that I get to thinking about it. It made me understand the vision in a way. Windy Hill Zone 1 is a super indicative first level that shows what Sonic Team wanted to do here. And that was, instead of creating a wide open space for you to run around or limit themselves to a linear path, they instead wanted a game featuring a series of limited paths, all shooting you in different directions depending on which one you take. I just think over the course of development they got so carried away by gimmicks and alternate gameplay styles that it distracted them from expanding upon level 1. And then when they eventually do get back around to it, it never feels like it's doing anything different from that beginning stage. If anything, it only seems to get worse over time. Desert Ruins Zone 1 is a level that I think expands upon Windy Hill in a cool way, but there's dash panels and ramps that for the first time in a long while had you rely on your momentum to get further. But that momentum only ever comes into play when you're using the spin dash, something the game is too distracted to ever tell you how to use. Still though, I had a lot of fun with this one. Sonic Lost World in my mind is bumped from a 6 to a solid 7. Maybe 6.5, I don't know, but it's an improvement. Now, if they can just build upon what worked about Sonic Lost World and...
Oh no!
Sonic Lost World on 3DS was a game I always wanted to play as a kid. I didn't know anybody who owned it, and didn't even get the chance to see much of the game. But one thing enamored me, and it's that this was the first time Sega have even attempted to put a fully 3D Sonic game on a handheld. How could that not be amazing? Every Sonic game thus far with a port on lesser hardware has come off as a cheap attempt to capture as much as they can from the original, and oftentimes limiting its scope as a result. Except for colors. But Dimps are going to do something truly ambitious this time around, and I even got the chance to download and play the demo when it released, and I thought it was pretty solid based on the 2 stages you get to play. Then I never bought it. The rule at Christmas time in my house was 2 video games, no more. And so I wasn't just gonna waste that on getting the same video game twice. And so naturally I asked for the Wii U version along with... I actually don't remember, so it couldn't have been that worth it. But hey, maybe a forgettable game was the better option. As something I've continuously heard over the years is that Sonic Lost World on 3DS is horrible. Like, really horrible. I honestly didn't believe this. I mean, it's Sonic Lost World on 3DS. How bad could it be? Very. A common thing said towards Lost World on Wii U is that it shares a lot of similarities to Sonic Extreme, the cancelled Sega Saturn game. But I want to make a counter-argument and say that Sonic Lost World on 3DS is way more in line with what I would have expected from Sonic Extreme. Shit, I will stand by the fact that I think the first couple levels are alright. There are many aspects of it that I actually find to be executed better than the console version. Parkour, for example, is given much more emphasis here, along with Sonic not having that weird arc when running along a wall. Instead, you just go straight, which makes it a lot more manageable to see if you'll reach your goal or not. The stages are also so big that it makes up for the fact that Sonic moves so fast and that his turn is a little wide. There's so much empty space here that it was never really a problem, and controlling him in midair was actually rather responsive. If they could just build upon this in future levels, that would be what the fuck is this? What is with every 3D Sonic game now needing to include these shoehorned in 2D segments? Although they're not even 2D segments anymore, these are full-on 2D stages, with a Sonic that was clearly not designed for them. The screen crunch is atrocious. There's so many pathways I need to get to that I just can't see until it's already too late. Just getting through this first zone was painful. If this is the level of shittiness I have to deal with for the entire game, then I'm in for a true nightmare. But then, I had an even more terrifying thought. What if it only gets worse from here? Lost World on 3DS follows the exact same structure as the Wii U one, surprisingly. There's a lot of meat to this game. I don't think this is like Generations 3DS, where it was evidently a rush job. It's just bad, fundamentally. Each world has 4 zones. I don't know why the levels are called zones instead of X in Lost World, that's just what Sonic Team were feeling that day. But even then, there's only really 3 proper stages, as the 4th is always a boss. And whereas the Wii U version had said boss be at the end of a regular level, here it's only the fight, and probably where I had my biggest sigh of relief, as most of them are fairly straightforward and easy. The only ones to give me any trouble were Master Zik, just from how terrible the controls were, and how annoying it was to target him, and Zor for reasons I'll get into. If every stage just built upon what worked about Windy Hill, and honestly, I think it would be fine. Far from good, but still fine. But this game falters because of one factor, and that's the gimmicks. Every stage in this game has one or multiple gimmicks that grind the piece down to a halt. The average level in Lost World 3DS will take you at least 7 minutes. And again, that's on a good one. You have this constant timer counting down in the top right, and sometimes that shit can start at 25 minutes. I have no clue, and usually, it's not right to say this, but I have no clue how anybody working on this game could play through half of these levels and not realize that they would only be improved by slicing half of it off. This is a handheld game too, meant to be picked up and played on the go. In what world would anybody want to play this while on the bus or while waiting for an appointment when the levels can take you almost half a fucking hour? Anyways, like I said, the gimmicks are really what bring the game down, and I'm just talking about the wisps. Compared to the console version, the wisps have way more emphasis put on them here, whereas that version will have them typically be nothing more than something optional that leads you to a different pathway. Here, most levels have them be required in order to beat it, like Desert Ruins needing you to use the asteroid wisp to suck in your surroundings, or Sky Road having this horrible level where you're pretty much using it the entire stage, you needing to collect enough stuff to jump higher throughout the level. And if it ever runs out, you need to go and grab another one and then start collecting everything all over again. Or in Tropical Coast, where an entire level is built around using the drill wisp to awkwardly get through the ocean. And if it runs out this time, you're pretty much dead, it's hell. That's not to even mention the exclusive wisps to this version. First we have Burst, which is thankfully always situational. Thankfully, because this was clearly not designed to be used in a 3D space, it's so awkward and I can never tell where I'm landing. Lightning sounds fun, you being able to homing attack these batteries and jump off them to get to higher areas. However, the hit detection is so bad that most of the time you may as well just skip it because you're doing this over constant bottomless pits. And finally, there's the Rock Wisp, which introduces us to quite possibly the worst decision in this game, mandatory gyro controls. Yay! You need to move the 3DS all over the place in order to move this thing around. And look, okay, now, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I'm not playing this game on a real 3DS. Don't ask how. I emulated it, and for the life of me, I could not get the DualShock working on this so I could use its built-in gyro. Seems like I need a different emulator to try and do that, but I'm already near the end of the game and that would mean starting over, so I don't know. So now to use the gyro, I need to keep one hand on my controller for jumping, and my other hand on the mouse for gyro. But it's so sensitive to control that I end up flying all over the place. Then we have other levels like Frozen Factory, which have these god-awful snowball gimmicks where you spend the entire stage just rolling them around to go in holes while avoiding a bigger snowball that can attack you. Sky Road had this awful 2D casino level which I hated, and all this, by the way, all of this is just beating the stage. I have to worry about the S ranks too. By the end of my first playthrough, I had about 12 of 28 S ranks, which sounds pretty good. That's like almost half and stuff. Before you remember that 8 of those were on boss fights, 1 was on level 1, and the other 2 were randomly acquired first try in Silent Forest despite dying a shit ton. It seems like the ranks are mostly dependent on time, but I can never tell. The requirements are not balanced at all. Like I said, I could die all the time on a few of them and get it easy. But then there are other stages like Desert Ruins Zone 2, which I would continuously beat as fast as I possibly could with a decent amount of rings, yet I would always fall short of the S. Also made me really start to hate the wall run mechanic as I was constantly sticking to it when just trying to get through the stage. The homing attack also just has way too wide a hit detection, and so runs would frequently be ruined by me trying to homing attack something and then end up being flung somewhere else. And then I reached it. The Silent Forest boss fight. Like I said, all these bosses have been pretty simple thus far. All S's first try. However, I was distraught to get to Zor and see that his boss fight requires you to use the 3DS gyro to look around the map and home in on him. it was pretty much impossible. Just look at this, it's going every which way. Sometimes it flings all over the place, and other times I could just barely move it no matter how hard I tried. I eventually did beat it and get the S rank, but that was after like 45 minutes of trial and error, waiting for the perfect situation where he thankfully wasn't too far away from my starting position, then the even more perfect situation where that happens twice in a row, as you need at least 2 cycles to beat him. I was pretty happy once I got to Lava Mountain and saw the entire thing was nothing but a boss rush, 2 Zeddies per level. Oh boy, a bunch of easy S's. But then I got to the second and immediately went, oh shit, I need to fight Zor again. Except this time, I needed to land that perfect scenario 3 times in a row, and every time I failed it meant having to refight Xena all over again. I eventually did it, didn't get the S rank because I had to go through a couple cycles, but I was able to move on and beat the game. But I seriously have no clue how I'm gonna... What? What do you mean hard mode? Oh no. Oh, you have to be fucking joking, right? There's a hard mode variant of every stage in the game? How did they have the time for all this, but no time to make any of it fun? It was also around this time where I realized that the special stages I've been avoiding like the plague because, well, who could have guessed they're also infamously horrible and based completely around gyro controls, also have S ranks, naturally. It was at this point I realized I had to throw my hands up in the air and admit defeat. If I even wanted a shot at S-ranking Lost World on 3DS, I would need to find a different emulator and start the game from the beginning. And I didn't want to do that. I'd been playing Lost World from morning till night every day for about a week, and just realized that getting through it would be impossible. And so, I got really mad. And then I closed the game. But that doesn't mean I'm quitting. I'm just taking a breather. To make up for the fact that I'm not getting all the S ranks in this video, I will be doing a live stream this upcoming Saturday where I will start over. I will get the gyro controls working if it's the last thing I do, and I will get all the S ranks in Sonic Lost World on 3DS. And then after that, because it really deserves it, I will make another giant video dissecting every single thing wrong with this game, level by level. Sorry if this is anticlimactic, but just know, it will be done. And then maybe I'll just grab that 3-hour video, stick it in this one, and upload it to midnight mark for the complete experience. Who knows? All I know is, I want to be done with this shit. Back to the boost, experiment field, I guess, pack it in. Generations and Lost World were games I was excited for, but neither of those could ever hope to rival how much I was anticipating Sonic Forces. It had been 4 years since the last mainline Sonic game after the mega failure that was Sonic Boom, and so on one glorious night in Los Angeles, Aaron Webber and Takashi Iizuka got on stage to announce the next mainline modern Sonic game. Sonic Generations 2. The Forces release cycle is something I remember super vividly. I actually would give my unscripted thoughts on every new trailer or piece of gameplay for the game on this very channel as they would release.
I'm back on Forces again. It looks that they revealed an E3 trailer. The only new stuff was CG, but that CG was amazing.
And it's funny to see my hope for the game in retrospect go from optimism to cynicism, and then back to optimism, for about 5 seconds before it was a week until the game was out and we'd only seen a couple stages worth of gameplay. Then I got it and realized, oh, that was the entire game. I beat it in 2 hours and was miserable. Sure, it ain't the worst Sonic game out there, but it's soulless. The ultimate case of Sega phoning it in, along with it being at a time when they were arguably at their most money-hungry and sly in their advertising. Play as Shadow in over 10 modern Sonic levels. You know, except for the ones that involve QuickTime events or teaming up with the Avatar, which is most of them. But hey, at least you can use them in iconic stages such as EX Flying Pod 1. It's not technically false advertising. Anyways, I was looking for any kind of content I could squeeze out of this thing. I'd been waiting 4 years to play it. And so I got all the red rings, I got all the number things, I got all the moon medals, and naturally, I got all the S ranks. After Generations disappointed hardcore fans with its super easy to obtain S's, folks were eager to see if Forces would go back to making them a challenge. I remember watching gameplay discussions with people desperately going, wait, no, okay, this person playing got an A rank, I think they're harder to get this time. Nope. I can't imagine I'll be spending as long talking about this one compared to the others because it was pretty much just a case of playing through the entire game normally. There were maybe 4 I missed on my first try. I guess we gotta split this up into 4 categories: Classic, Modern, Avatar, and Tag Team. We'll get Classic out of the way first, the poor guy only has 5 stages in the entire thing. Not sure what happened here, but his controls are now atrocious. It's not like Generations where they're simply not like the Genesis games. No, it's just bad. Which is a real shame, as I actually think Classic Sonic has the best level design in the entire game compared to the others. The only level which I think is poorly handled here is Iron Fortress, and that's more so down to the lame auto-scroller aspect. Ghost Town, on the other hand, actually has a ton of alternate pathways. I love that they convey the top, middle, and bottom path through the roofs, the houses, and then the sewers. That's a really clever idea and visually shows the player which route they're on. It peaks here, unfortunately. I think simply looking at Green Hill and Generations compared to this gives you a good idea of how big of a downgrade it really is. But they're all fairly straightforward. If you beat them fast enough, you're golden. Modern Sonic's levels are nothing. Blink and you'll miss it. There are some that border on being fun, but by the time they pick up, it's already ending. Egg Gate has some neat moments, but it completely falls flat due to its many 2D segments, which just come off like a less colorful Starlight Carnival. Metropolitan Highway looks gorgeous and is quite possibly the only level ever made with the Hedgehog Engine 2 to rival Sonic Unleashed. It's really all in the lighting. His final stage is ugly and lame, Lost Valley's too easy, forgot Luminous Forest even existed. And once again, as long as you beat it fairly quickly and keep your rings, you'll be fine. The Avatar stages are easily when the game is at its best, but that's not really saying much. I think I like the slower pace of these levels compared to modern Sonic, focusing a lot more on little bits of platforming and mowing down enemies. It may sound weird to prefer the slower levels, but when all I'm doing as Sonic is dashing through everything like a maniac, then dashing through everything like a maniac quickly loses its impact. It's like they're attempting to give you constant dopamine in Spectacle, which fails to understand why Spectacle works in Sonic. It's because I got myself there. I reached that part of the level, I didn't just sprint down a hallway. See, this moment in Modern Cityscape comes to mind, where if you stand at the left side of the screen during the gun truck chase, Sonic will start running on this nearby billboard before landing back on the floor as the truck completely annihilates it. That little bit of context sensitivity gives me so much more dopamine than watching a boring cutscene of Sonic riding a ship or getting eaten by a snake, because I took part in getting Sonic to do that. Anyways, what was I talking about? The stupid Avatar? Sure, whatever. I stuck with the regular Burst Wisp-On throughout my entire playthrough aside from one level, and it's because it's insanely overpowered. It was so painful sitting through the marketing for this game, as when they'd show this, everyone went, well, wait, what's stopping me from just using this the entire level? Finally, the tag team stages, which I think the game should have entirely revolved around. If we had like 30 stages of this, I'm sure I'd be able to buy Sonic's Bond with the Avatar a lot more. The first tag team stage is the only time I had to change my Wisp Bond to the Lightning one, and it's because the S rank is pretty reliant on your ring count by the end. And since you can just use this thing endlessly throughout the entire second half of the level, you end it with like 800 rings, it's a joke. Also, I did a daily mission by mistake, and so a bunch of levels ended up multiplying my score by 1.2, which made getting the S even easier to accomplish. Like Generations, as you go through this game, you unlock bonus missions. These being exclusive to either Modern or the Avatar. Get fucked, Classic Sonic, sorry. Although whereas Generations gave you 90 missions that all had a certain level of care put into them, Forces instead gives you about 7. So few that it makes me question why they're even here. They're all about 30 seconds to a minute long and focus on shoving as many assets as they can around the place. Here's a mission where you have to avoid fire. Here's a mission where you have to stand on disappearing blocks. Here's a mission where you have to avoid bombs. Here's a mission where you have to brick yellow boxes. Here's a mission where you need to avoid wait a second, this is all just shit from Sonic Colors. There's also 2 flying pod levels. I feel like if there's only 2, you don't need to number them. And which you just need to avoid the spike balls coming out of the pod from Sonic Colors. Episode Shadows, something that gave many fans, including me, some much needed excitement towards the game. A free prequel to the main story where you play as Shadow through 3 levels, all of which are slightly altered takes on levels from the main game. Second 2 honestly gave me the most trouble to S rank. The water one had such a specific route needed to build score, that shit was not intuitive at all. And the second required you to constantly be attacking these rows of Buzz Bomber enemies to shoot yourself forward. But for some reason the hit detection would constantly fuck me over, it took ages. But aside from that, Sonic Forces is over and done with. This game is boring for me to even talk about, so I apologize, I have nothing to say. Sega didn't care with this one, so neither do I. Can't believe we've already reached the most recent Sonic game. For reference, from the year 2002 to 2012 in this video, we've looked at Sonic Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic Rush, Sonic Rivals, Sonic 06, Sonic Rush Adventure, Sonic Rivals 2, Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Colors, and Sonic Generations. Whereas between the years of 2012 to 2022, we've looked at Sonic Lost World, Sonic Forces, and now Sonic Frontiers. Can't even make the quality over quantity argument, damn. No, I was pretty positive about Sonic Frontiers when it came out. I didn't love it or anything and thought it was a joke that this is what they spent 5 years working on, but on its own, away from all context, It was a breath of fresh air for the series, one that's going to age horribly, but at the time it was released, it was met with positive reviews and a relieved fan base. I feel like I'm constantly fluctuating on how I look at Frontiers. Some days I like it, some days I don't. It's probably the Sonic game I associate most with the freeze mixed bag. The open zone is repetitive, has uninteresting design and terrible pop-in, but while playing it, I have fun. The combat is overly simplistic with no real strategy involved in how to approach fights, but it's cool to pull off. The boss fights are barely bosses and go down without issue, but there's a lot of great spectacle here which has been sorely missing from the franchise in recent years. Like I said, mixed bag. One aspect I consistently stand by thinking is horseshit, however, is the cyberspace missions. Lucky for me, that's what I gotta focus on. Before the game came out, we learned that to tickle the itch of the people who weren't too keen on the open zone idea, and were instead looking for something more in line to a traditional 3D Sonic game, we're getting these cyberspace levels, which are pretty much just its version of the boost stages. It's funny, when Frontiers came out, all the major reviewers, despite whatever criticisms they would have on the overall package, consistently touted the cyberspace stages as being when the game is at its best, but when I played it, I couldn't disagree more. I think these are some of the worst levels in 3D Sonic history. In these stages, you can complete up to 4 tasks, all of which reward you with a key to unlock the Chaos Emerald scattered throughout the zone. However, today all I gotta worry about is the S rank, which once again is strictly time-based. Which is good, because if I had to worry about killing enemies for score in these levels, I don't want to put a bullet through my brain with how slow the homing attack cooldown is. Let's just get this out of the way, this is the worst Sonic has ever controlled in 3D, second to none. Don't get me wrong, in the open zone, it's pretty good. I wish they'd get rid of the double jump and put more consideration into how all these moves flow together, as overall he's pretty rigid, but in the cyberspace levels, every issue is cranked up to 11. It was so bizarre coming back to this game for this video and having to disable the physics mods I've been using for the past 2 years to remember, oh yeah, this is how the game actually controls. There is no sense of flow to any of this, and it was somehow even worse before the updates. Usually the controls for cyberspace are set in stone compared to the open zone stuff, which you can tweak with these sliders, but I'm pretty sure the one to carry over between the two is the option to let your jump carry momentum while boosting. Yes, that had to be added in a patch, don't ask why. So that at least makes things a little more bearable, but it's still far from good, especially compared to Unleashed Generations, even Colors, maybe Lost World. Pretty embarrassing how things only seem to regress with the boost formula, but whatever. Sometimes, you know, every once in a blue moon, something cool does happen even if it makes no sense, like look, how the fuck did I save that? But really, it's mainly his turning that's so incredibly stiff. More so than any other game. There are levels that have these somewhat tight turns, but I can't understand how they played this without realizing the Sonic they've built for this cannot physically make those turns while boosting, which would be fine if you didn't grind to a halt after letting go of the boost button. It's made even worse by the level design. By far the best stages in Frontiers are the ones that were solely designed for the engine they've built, which sucks because a majority of them are simply lifted from other Sonic games, mainly just Unleashed Generations and Adventure 2. Turns that were easy to make as Sonic in those games are near impossible here without consistently hugging the wall. Not a new thought by any means, but I'm just sick of how many of these games now rely on reusing old levels in their designs. How did we go 20 years without that? Yet for the next 10 they act as if the franchise will die without another Green Hill. It's not all bad, there are aspects of Sonic's controls here I like, but they're so few and far between, it's like picking needles in a haystack of problems. Like their returning bounce, I hate that you don't get enough air movement after doing it, but hey, bouncing into a boost is pretty fun. That's something. I decided to do the challenge mode because fuck playing through the entire 10-hour game just for this 30 minutes of actually important gameplay, and so I'm thankful that instead of having to run around each open zone again scouring for the stages, I can just select the option on the menu that takes me through all of them one by one. The Sonic Frontiers cyberspace stages are not known for being particularly difficult, most of them are around 30 seconds to a minute long. Honestly, I think I spend more time in each stage trying to see what game they ripped the design from more than actually paying attention to what I'm doing. See, now that I've played the Extra X and Unleashed, I can tell there was even more copied from that game. But there is the occasional one that people had difficulty with, and by occasional, I mean one. The second level in the game, 1-2. I got the S first try. Yeah, when the game first came out, this level was infamous for how tight the S rank was to get, and I think it really highlights all the major issues with the way Frontiers does things. And it's because to get an S rank here, you have to purposefully avoid anything you think would help. I'll give you a couple examples. Attacking enemies to cross greater distance? Best to be avoided, as like I said, the cooldown time is horrible. And it's not like you can just boost out of it right away, and even then, you lose all your momentum and can't move much in the air, so get fucked, don't bother. Don't hit dash panels either, which seems pretty counterintuitive considering they're designed to help you go faster, but not here. You actually go slower. Not sure how that happened, but whatever, par for the course at this point. Basically, throw aside all your Sonic instincts like going to the top route to be faster. Instead, take the bottom and just run, avoid all the bullshit. But I mean, it's not like this is even a challenge anymore now that the second update reintroduced the spin dash, which is completely, utterly broken. You get these by playing through action chains in the open zone, which in and of themselves had their own ranks to get. This is mindless busy work, but at the very least forces you to think harder about how you traverse the space. But even then, it's pretty exploitable. Just find the route that has the most objects to interact with and you're sorted. Doing all these gives you the spin dash, which makes every cyberspace level a complete joke. Honestly, I wish they took cues from the Lost World spin dash, maybe just make it a little more straightforward to use. Because all we have here is the boost with gravity-defying physics. Fun to use, but hardly what I would want to see from the series going forward. It's like Minecraft creative mode. Sure, I like flying around, but after a while it gets boring. This is then further reflected in the added cyberspace levels, which you can find in the Update 3 open zone. When I first played this update, I thought these acts were great, insanely fun and offered so much more freedom than we're used to. But upon revisiting them, I oftentimes find myself hating them, and I couldn't really understand why. Then it hit me. I'm now playing this after going through almost every 3D Sonic game, trying to learn the ins and outs of these stages and perform at peak efficiency. So now, after all that, we're just left with a game where you can pretty much just fly over everything. Seems so lame in comparison. I really hope they don't take the wrong lessons from people enjoying the Spin Dash's inclusion in Frontiers, because I really think they went too far in the opposite direction. It's like when people thought the game was too easy, and so they went out of their way to make the third update as furiously difficult as humanly possible. Going too far in the opposite direction is still an issue. There has to be some kind of middle ground here. Sorry, I know I'm not talking about how it was getting the S ranks a lot here, but that's just because there really was no challenge. Again, the Spin Dash busts every single one of these in half, and that makes me more mad than anything. Also, I hate that they didn't include these extra acts in the cyberspace challenge on the menu, meaning I did have to walk around the hub world for ages trying to find them all. These updates had some good ideas, but at the end of the day, the overall package still feels like one step forward, 2 steps back. And so I'm really hoping the next game tries harder to not use openness and freedom as a crutch for actually designing engaging levels. Anyways. May seem like a weird one to include on the outside, considering Sonic Origins is a mere collection of 4 classic Sonic games, but no, it does indeed have ranks in the never-discussed mission mode. Most saw this as nothing more than a meaningless bonus, a collection of bite-sized objectives that feel thrown together. A reminder of nothing more than the shit they shoved into Forces for the illusion of extra content, not helped by the terrible-looking box sprites scattered all over the place. I felt the same way. When I first got Origins, I beat every game multiple times, but barely touched this. I think I got near the end of the Sonic 1 missions, got frustrated by one of them, and then gave up. But upon returning to them for this video, it's actually pretty fucking cool and much more in line with the missions we saw in Sonic Generations. After you get past Sonic 1. Because of how much more limited the gimmicks are in that game, a majority of the missions simply rely on sticking you in a small arena and asking you to defeat as many enemies as possible. Do it fast enough and you get the S. I eventually got stuck on this one where I had to specifically spin dash into a ton of enemies in like 25 seconds. You basically need to perform it perfectly, which sounds tough, but again, at most you'll be spending 25 seconds on this, so replaying it isn't much of a time sink. Sonic CD has a lot of fun ones too, with some super challenging ones by the end, like having everything move at twice the speed, you needing to take this shortcut and avoid the enemy to get to the end in time. Sonic 2 is where things get super fun though. I love the variety of missions shown here. We play as Knuckles in Aquatic Ruin as you need to collect rings while avoiding those arrows shooting out of the Eggman faces. You gotta use the bumper physics to get higher in the stage, rack up as many points as possible in Casino Night, make sure Tails doesn't get hit by anything as your partner, and Sky Chase having one where you need to make sure you collect as many rings as you can to raise the rank. They have a hard mode variant to this later, and it's by far the one that took me the longest to beat. This shit was tough. Sonic 3 in comparison is pretty standard, but I love that they brought back the idea of creating missions specifically around the elemental shields. The only real thing holding this mode back is how short the missions are. Like, they're fun and challenging, but it really seems like there was only room to expand upon these and create more mission types. What if we add ones where I'm hanging onto Tails like in the Boss of Marble Garden? Fuck it, make it a Heroes reference and have Knuckles hanging on too and you gotta dodge shit. How about beating a section of Sandopolis with the ghosts at max? I don't know, you get what I mean, right? There's so much more to do here. But as is, what they do have was pretty fun, and offered something new to do with these classic games. Still not much to say though. And finally, I wanted to give a quick little segment highlighting Sonic Dream Team. I actually bought Apple Arcade to play it a while back, but eventually canceled my subscription because that's quite literally all I wanted to play on the service. But apparently since then, the game has gotten that cavalcade of updates like new levels, extra abilities for each character, and most importantly for this video, ranks. Guess I gotta get Apple Arcade again. These are seemingly only available on the extra missions and boss fights, not in the main levels. And the reason I don't have much to say here is because these extra stages are bite-sized. Them hitting even a minute long is rare. And it's because of that, and Dream Team being surprisingly polished for a phone game, that I beat it fairly easily. Didn't take long at all. There are only 4 zones, every zone has 3 acts, and every act has 4 missions, with you eventually unlocking an added 2 over the course of playing the game, totaling to about 18 S ranks per zone, and 76 S's total after counting the bosses. That's a lot of S's for such a small game, but at the same time, when a majority of them only require about 30 seconds of playtime, it goes by in a breeze. The main level I struggled with was the final one of Dream Factory Act 1, and that was mostly due to its more maze-like design. Even more maze-like than the actual maze level. But the rest was a breeze, not much to say. The game is good, I hope it gets ported to Switch or something. And, I guess that's it. When I started this video, I didn't think I'd be ending on a port of the Genesis games on a fucking phone game, but here we are. That's every S rank in Sonic history. This was always such a pipe dream of mine. Some kids wanted to be a doctor, some astronauts. I just wanted to get all the S ranks in Sonic Colors, and now that I've done it for every game, I guess it just feels kinda underwhelming. I wonder if this has something to do with how much the ranking system in general has regressed over time. You know, if this video ended after 06, I would have been like, phew, fucking, that was a challenge, you know? In SA2, Heroes, Shadow, 06, up to Colors really, the S ranks felt like a true achievement to get, a real show of feat. Something you show to your friends and say, yep, I did it, I wasted my time this much. Yet from generations onwards, they got simplified more and more to the point where a majority of these just felt like I was playing the game normally and not really trying all that hard. I suppose on Sega's part, this was to make the games feel more gratifying. Like I said at the start of the video, there was nothing more crushing than finally getting to the end of a really hard stage in Heroes, only to then be reminded that I beat the level as badly as I possibly could have. But that summer I spent trying to get all those A ranks, no matter how much of a struggle or time sink it was, really did make it all the more satisfying once I'd finally done it. It allowed me to become a bigger fan of the game and the series as a whole, forcing myself to learn the ins and outs of it. I suppose to Sega it isn't seen as all that big of a deal. Funnily enough, the timing on this is gonna make the video immediately outdated, as in just a couple weeks, Shadow Generations comes out, with the S ranks in that looking to be just as easy to get. But even then, I think that's more so a reflection of how mechanically simple Sonic games have gotten in the past 10 years. Instead of these fun, exhilarating arcadey score attacks, the ranking system has been boiled down to just going fast. Less complicated for sure, but also less fun to master as a result. With Open Zone being the way to go forward, it doesn't seem like that's going to change anytime soon. But now with the series having a bigger budget due to the success of the movies and Frontiers, I can only hope we see Sega attempt to make smaller, more arcade-like Sonic adventures in between the bigger budget games. Their lack of budget really forced them to try and make Sonic games that had something for everyone. No matter where the series was headed with these grander plans, they always had to make sure there's something for the classic fans, don't forget about the boost now! And it creates games that just lack any type of focus. Sure, Frontiers has something for the boost fans, but who cares if what it has is inferior to the games that people like in that style? Who cares if this game has classic Sonic if he's only here for 5 levels? Superstars, for as mediocre as I think it is, gives me hope that we can see smaller adventures in between the bigger stuff. Just don't charge $60 for it. Bring back that more arcadey Sonic fun that people loved so much, but don't shove it in your big budget open world game, because at that point, you're just trying to put a square peg in a round hole and nobody's happy. Make more games like Rush or the Adventure series. Hell, let's take a Hardlight do it. They did a fantastic job with Dream Team. I guess I'm just tired of the ranking system feeling so forced now, like it's only here for tradition's sake. But whatever happens next for the series, I'll be there to play it, and I guess rank it now, it's my duty at this point. But for now, with this 5-month-long endeavor finally over and done with, I'm glad to be taking a break with Sonic for a couple weeks. Oh wait, no, shit!